They thought she was just another trucker, a lone, outnumbered, easy prey. When the biker kicked her in the back inside that Wyoming diner, he expected her to crumble. Instead, Ava Lane, former Army convoy instructor, turned physics into poetry. One pivot, one lock, one explosive throw that sent their 240-pound leader crashing through a pickup windshield. The video went viral in minutes. The gang swore revenge. What followed wasn't just a fight. It was a 72-hour chess match where documentation beat intimidation, and a waitress with shaking hands became a warrior. Stay until the end, and drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this story travels. The sun was bleeding out over the high plains of Wyoming, turning the sky into bruised shades of orange and violet, when Ava Lane guided her Kenworth into the gravel lot of Nate's Diner. The truck stop sat at the edge of Red Butte Population 847. If you counted the dogs, a wind-scraped cluster of buildings where Interstate 80 briefly remembered civilization existed. Her rig's air brakes hissed like a tired giant, settling down the sound carrying across the emptiness, where sagebrush and dust were the only neighbors for miles. Ava killed the engine, flexed her fingers on the wheel, and allowed herself 3 seconds of stillness. 22 hours on the road. Her lower back ached in that specific way that came from holding 80,000 pounds of steel steady through crosswinds that wanted to shove you into the median. She rolled her shoulders, felt the familiar tightness between her shoulder blades, the place where her body stored tension like a battery stores charge. Through the bug-spattered windshield, she could see the diner's neon sign flickering, "Nate's hot food, cold beer, warm, welcome." 2 of those 3 things were usually true. She'd stopped here a dozen times over the past year, always for the same reason Kim's coffee was hot enough to strip paint, and the coconut cream pie was worth the detour. But tonight, something was off. 3 motorcycles sat parked across the handicapped spaces near the entrance, gleaming chrome catching the last rays of sunlight. Custom paint jobs, skulls, and flames, the kind of aesthetic that screamed, "I peaked in high school and decided to make it my entire personality." The bikes were positioned deliberately aggressively like dogs marking territory. Ava's eyes narrowed. She'd spent 6 years in the Army training convoy crews to spot threats before they materialized. Pattern recognition wasn't just a skill, it was survival instinct filed down to reflex. Blocked access points, territorial display, intimidation posture. Her mental checklist started running automatically. She grabbed her jacket from the passenger seat, worn denim with reflective strips on the sleeves, and climbed down from the cab. The Wyoming wind hit her immediately, carrying the smell of diesel dust and something else. Cigarette smoke. Male voices loud and performative. Laughter with edges sharp enough to cut. The parking lot gravel crunched under her boots as she walked toward the diner. Through the windows, she could see movement figures in leather vests. The glint of chain wallets, the aggressive sprawl of bodies taking up too much space. And there behind the counter, Kim's small frame moving with the careful precision of someone trying not to attract attention. Ava's hand went to her phone, checking the charge. 93%. Good. The camera app was already bookmarked 1 swipe away. Old habits. In convoy training, she'd drilled it into her crews. Your phone is your first line of defense. Documentation beats escalation every single time. She pushed through the diner's door. The bell above it chimed a cheerful little sound, completely at odds with the atmosphere inside. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees, despite the blast of overheated air from the vents. 5 men in leather vests occupied the center of the room, spread across 2 booths, and the counter like an occupying force. Road reapers patches on their backs a skull with motorcycle wheels for eyes, the kind of logo designed by someone who thought subtlety was a sign of weakness. Kim was behind the counter, her hands trembling slightly as she refilled a coffee cup. The liquid sloshed, nearly spilling. One of the biker's shaved head-neck tattoos crawling up toward his jaw leaned forward and made a show of watching the near miss. "Steady there, sweetheart," he drawled, voice dripping with mock concern. "Wouldn't want you to hurt yourself?" The others laughed. It was the kind of laughter that had nothing to do with humor and everything to do with power. Testing boundaries. Establishing dominance. Ava had seen it 1,000 times, in 1,000 different contexts. Barracks, bullies, checkpoint, thugs, the petty tyrants who confused cruelty with strength. Ava let the door close behind her with a deliberate softness. She didn't look directly at the bikers, not yet. Instead, she caught Kim's eye and gave her a small nod. Just enough to say, "I see you. You're not alone." Kim's shoulders dropped 1/2 inch. The relief was microscopic, but real. Ava moved toward the counter, choosing a stool 3 down from the nearest reaper. Close enough to be present, far enough to avoid immediate confrontation. She set her keys on the formica with a soft click, positioning them within easy reach. Her jacket stayed on. Exit strategy: 12 feet to the door, 6 seconds if she had to move fast, 4 if she didn't care about looking calm. "Coffee, hon." Kim's voice was steady, but Ava could hear the hairline fracture beneath it. "Please, black, and a slice of that coconut pie if you've got any left. Always save a piece for you." Kim's smile was genuine for 1/2 second before her eyes flicked toward the bikers, and the warmth drained out of it. The man at the center of the group, the obvious leader, turned his attention toward Ava. He was big, probably 6'3", built like someone who'd spent years cultivating intimidation as a lifestyle. Bushy beard shot through with gray leather vest, straining across a barrel chest, hands the size of catcher's mitts. His patch read "Brick" in embroidered letters below the Road Reapers logo. Of course it did. "Well, well," Brick's voice was gravel mixed with motor oil. "Truck Barbie graces us with her presence." His crew snickered on cue. Performative masculinity was always a team sport. Ava didn't bite. She kept her eyes on Kim, watching the coffee pour dark and steaming into a chipped ceramic mug. The diner's fluorescent lights hummed overhead, a mosquito whine soundtrack to the tension building in the room. "You lost, princess?" Brick continued, emboldened by her silence. "Daddy's rig break down. Need a real rider to show you how machinery works." More laughter. One of the others, wiry with a patchy goatee and a vest patch that read "Torch," slapped the table. The salt shaker rattled, then tipped over. Salt spilled across the formica in a white stream. Nobody moved to clean it up. In the kitchen doorway, Nate Olvera appeared, the diner's owner, a weathered man in his 60s with hands stained permanently brown from decades of grill work. His face was carefully neutral, but Ava could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. Nate had run this place for 30 years. He'd seen trouble before. He knew the math, 5 against 1, his livelihood hanging in the balance, the sheriff's department 20 minutes away on a good day. "Gentlemen," Nate said, his voice carrying the careful diplomacy of someone defusing a bomb. "How about we all just enjoy our meals in peace? Kim's got fresh pie coffees hot. We're enjoying ourselves just fine, old man." Brick didn't even look at Nate. His eyes stayed locked on Ava, reading her like a poker tell he thought he'd already figured out. "Just making conversation with the lady trucker here. She don't mind. Do you, Barbie?" Ava wrapped her hands around the coffee mug Kim had set in front of her. The heat seeped into her palms, grounding, centering. She took a slow sip, letting the bitter warmth coat her throat, buying herself 3 seconds to think. Every instinct screamed at her to respond, to put this overgrown child in his place with words sharp enough to draw blood. She'd done it before, had a whole arsenal of verbal strikes designed to deflate bullies without throwing a punch. But something in the room's energy stopped her. This wasn't about winning an argument. This was about something darker. The way Brick's crew watched him waiting for direction. The way Torch kept glancing at the door, tracking exits. The way the third biker, thick-necked, silent, with grit on his patch, had his phone out, angled toward the room like he was filming. They wanted a reaction. They were hunting for a reaction. Ava set down her coffee and turned her body slightly toward Brick, but kept her hands visible, resting on the counter. Non-threatening. Open. The kind of posture that de-escalation training taught you to adopt. "Just here for pie and coffee," she said evenly. "Same as everyone else." "Same as everyone else?" Brick mimicked, pitching his voice high and mocking. "Hear that, boys? She's same as everyone else." Torch leaned back in his booth boots up on the vinyl seat. "Awful lot of truck for a little thing like you to handle. You sure you got the strength for that kind of work?" Ava's jaw tightened. She felt the familiar heat building behind her sternum, the anger she'd learned to compress into something dense and controlled. In the army, they'd called her ice, because nothing seemed to rattle her. But ice wasn't the absence of heat. It was heat under pressure, transformed into something harder. Kim set the pie down in front of Ava with shaking hands. A few coconut flakes scattered across the counter. "Thank you," Ava said quietly, catching Kim's eye again. The waitress's pupils were dilated, her breathing shallow. Classic stress response. Ava had seen it in convoy drivers who'd just survived their first IED scare, the body flooding with adrenaline, trying to decide between fight, flight, or freeze. Brick rose from his booth with the kind of theatrical slowness designed to draw every eye in the room. He was even bigger, standing up, his shadow falling across Ava's back, like a threat made physical. She didn't turn. Instead, she tracked his reflection in the chrome napkin dispenser on the counter, distorted but functional. His right hand drifted toward his hip fingers, brushing the edge of his belt, checking for something, confirming its presence. Concealed carry. Probably a knife. Maybe a small-frame pistol. The way his vest hung the slight bulge at 4 o'clock position, yeah. Armed. Information filed away. Threat assessment updated? Brick moved closer. Ava could smell him now, leather cigarette smoke, cheap cologne, trying to mask the scent of someone who showered infrequently. He stopped directly behind her stool, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off his body. "You know what I think?" Brick's voice was low now, meant just for her. "I think you're in my seat." Ava took another bite of pie. Chewed slowly. Swallowed. The coconut cream was perfect, sweet, and light, exactly as she remembered. She let herself enjoy it for 3 full seconds before responding. "Counter-seating is first come, first served," she said, voice level. "I got here, I sat down. That's how it works." Behind the counter, Kim had backed up against the coffee maker, her knuckles white where she gripped the counter edge. Nate had emerged fully from the kitchen, now a dish towel twisted in his hands like a prayer rope. In the corner booth, partially hidden by a rack of faded tourist brochures, Ruth Calder sat with a medical journal open in front of her. Ruth was 73, a retired paramedic who'd spent 40 years running emergency calls across 3 counties. Her white hair was pulled back in a practical bun, her reading glasses perched on her nose, and her expression was one of focused awareness. She'd set the journal down. Her phone was in her hand now, screen dark but ready. Ava registered Ruth's presence with a microscopic nod. Witnesses. Potential allies. The tactical picture was starting to form. Brick's hand landed on the back of Ava's stool fingers, curling around the metal frame. "See, that's where you're wrong, princess." He leaned into his beard, brushing against her hair. "This is our place now. Which means when I want a seat, I get a seat. When I want the counter, I get the counter. When I want you to stand up and walk your tight little ass out that door, not happening." Ava's voice cut through his monologue, sharp and final. The temperature in the room dropped another 10 degrees. Torch sat up, straighter boots hitting the floor. Grit's phone camera swiveled, focusing on Ava and Brick. The fourth and fifth Reaper's nameless background players, until now, shifted in their seats, hands moving toward pockets, toward belts, toward wherever they kept their own versions of Brick's concealed carry. "Excuse me." Brick's voice was soft, dangerously soft. Ava set down her fork with deliberate care. She shifted her weight on the stool, adjusting her center of gravity. Her feet found solid purchase on the floor. Her hands stayed visible, open, non-threatening. But her body was coiling now, muscle memory from 1,000 training drills starting to wake up. "I said not happening." She still didn't turn around. "I'm going to finish my pie, drink my coffee, pay my bill, and then I'm leaving." In that order. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to stop humming. Brick's reflection in the napkin dispenser showed his face darkening, blood rushing to his cheeks, the kind of rage that came from having authority questioned in front of his crew. He was a man who'd built his entire identity on intimidation, on the assumption that size and aggression would always win. And here was this woman, 5'6", maybe 140 pounds, soaking wet, telling him no. He couldn't let it stand. Wouldn't let it stand. His crew knew it, too. Torch was already rising from the booth. Grit had repositioned for a better camera angle. The nameless two were flanking, creating a perimeter. Nate took a step forward, his voice desperate now. "Folks, please let's not—" Brick's hand shot out and grabbed the back of Ava's jacket, fingers bunching the denim. "I gave you a chance to do this easy." And that's when Ava felt it, the shift in Brick's weight, the telltale lean backward that meant he was about to yank her off the stool. But there was something else, too. A different kind of movement from behind and below. A drawing back. A cocking of intention. Torch had circled around. He was 3 feet behind her now, positioned at 7 o'clock, and his boot was already in motion. Ava saw it in the chrome reflection a fraction of a second before impact. The wind-up, the trajectory, the boot headed straight for her lower back. A cheap shot designed to humiliate, to hurt, to send her sprawling across the diner floor where they could all laugh and film and establish their dominance beyond any question. The kick landed. Pain exploded across Ava's lumbar spine, a white-hot spike that would leave bruises blooming across her kidneys by morning. Her body started to pitch forward, momentum carrying her toward the counter, toward the helpless sprawl they'd engineered. But Ava Lane had spent 6 years teaching convoy drivers how to survive ambushes. She'd spent 2 years before that studying Krav Maga, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and Judo, because the army had taught her that being small meant you had to be smarter, faster, more technical than everyone else. And she'd spent her entire childhood learning the fundamental truth that physics didn't care about your intentions, only your vectors. The kick gave her momentum. She took it, absorbed it, and transformed it. Instead of falling forward, Ava rotated on the stool, using the force of the impact to spin her body toward Brick. Her right hand shot up and caught his wrist, the one still gripping her jacket, and locked it in place with a grip strengthened by years of wrestling tie-down straps and air hoses. Her left hand drove upward elbow, extended, striking Brick's solar plexus with the point of her elbow. Air exploded from Brick's lungs in a shocked wheeze. Ava planted her left foot, shifted her hip, and used Brick's own forward lean against him. Basic judo principle: off-balancing. Use the opponent's weight, their momentum, their assumptions. Brick outweighed her by 100 pounds, but all that mass meant nothing if it wasn't under control. She rotated her hips hard, pulling Brick's captured wrist down and across her body while driving her shoulder into his center of mass. The throw was textbook ogoshi hip throw, the kind of technique that looked like magic when executed properly, but was really just applied physics. Brick's feet left the ground. For a moment, a perfect crystalline moment, the big man was airborne, his expression shifting from rage to confusion to the dawning realization that gravity was about to become his enemy. His body rotated through space entirely out of his control subject to forces he'd never bothered to understand, because he'd always been the force that others had to deal with. He traveled 6 feet through the air. The diner's window exploded outward in a cascade of safety glass as Brick's 240-pound frame hit it at speed. But the window was just the opening act. Beyond the window, parked at an unfortunate angle, was a 1990s Dodge Ram pickup, its windshield perfectly positioned to catch a falling biker. Brick hit the windshield with a sound like a car accident in miniature, the crystalline crunch of laminated glass spiderwebbing under impact, the hollow boom of a body striking sheet metal, the alarm immediately shrieking to life. Inside the diner, time seemed to suspend itself. Grit's phone was still recording, capturing everything. Torch stood frozen, his kick leg still extended, his brain struggling to process what had just happened. Kim's hand was pressed against her mouth, eyes wide. Nate's dish towel had fallen to the floor. Dr. Ruth had her phone up now, camera active, documenting from another angle. Ava stood beside the counter stool, her breathing controlled, her hands already dropping to her sides in a non-threatening posture. Her back screamed with pain from the kick, but adrenaline was keeping it at bay. She could feel her heartbeat in her ears, fast but steady. Training had taken over, moved her through the sequence, and now training was telling her what came next. Evidence, documentation, legal positioning. Kim, Ava said, her voice remarkably steady. Call 911. Tell them there's been an assault. Tell them the situation is contained, but we need sheriff's department and possibly an ambulance. Kim's hand fumbled for the phone behind the counter. Outside, Brick was rolling off the pickup's hood glass, falling from his leather vest like glittering rain. He was moving good, not dead, not even seriously injured by the look of it, just stunned and rapidly accumulating a world-class collection of bruises. The pickup's alarm continued to wail, a mechanical shriek that seemed to finally wake the other reapers from their shock. Torch's hand went to his belt, to the knife sheathed there. "Don't!" Ruth's voice cracked across the diner like a whip. The retired paramedic was on her feet, now phone camera trained on Torch. "Don't you dare! This is all on video, multiple angles. You pull that knife, you escalate from assault to attempted murder. Think about how that plays with a jury." Torch's hand stopped hovering over the knife handle. His eyes darted between Ruth's camera, Grit's camera, and the growing crowd of faces pressed against the diner's remaining windows. Other truckers drawn by the commotion, witnesses multiplying by the second. The math was changing. The isolated intimidation play they'd planned was turning into a public incident, with documentation witnesses and the distant sound of sirens starting to rise from the direction of town. Ava moved carefully toward the door, hands visible posture, non-threatening but alert. "Kim, stay behind the counter. Nate, lock the kitchen door. Nobody else moves until the sheriff arrives." Her voice carried command authority, the kind of tone that came from giving orders to combat drivers in situations where hesitation meant casualties. It was the voice of someone who'd trained for chaos and knew how to create islands of calm within it. Brick was on his feet outside now, supported by two of his crew who'd rushed out to help him. His face was a mask of rage and humiliation, glass fragments catching the parking lot lights like diamonds in his beard. He locked eyes with Ava through the broken window. "You're dead," he mouthed. No sound, just the shape of the words. "You're fucking dead." Ava held his gaze unblinking. Then she deliberately turned her back on him, the ultimate dismissal, and walked to where Ruth stood. "You got all that?" Ava asked quietly. Ruth nodded, her lined face grim. "Every second. Multiple angles when we combine my footage with that other bastard's. Timestamps, GPS enabled, location tagged, the works." Ava allowed herself a small exhale. Not relief, not yet, but acknowledgement that the first phase was handled. "We're going to need every frame. This isn't over." "Honey," Ruth said, her voice carrying the weight of 4 decades reading accident scenes and trauma cases, "this isn't even close to started." Through the broken window, they could see more motorcycles pulling into the parking lot. The Reapers were calling in reinforcements. Brick was on his phone, pacing his free hand, gesturing violently. The pickup's alarm finally died, leaving a ringing silence that somehow felt more ominous than the noise. Kim's voice drifted from behind the counter, shaky but audible. 911, yes, this is Kim Fan at Nate's Diner on Route 80, mile marker 214. There's been an assault. A man kicked one of our customers. She defended herself. And now there's more of them coming. We need... The dispatcher's response was inaudible, but Kim's face went pale. 20 minutes. Her voice cracked. They're here now. Ava's tactical assessment updated instantly. 20 minutes was an eternity when you were outnumbered and the opposition was armed, angry, and humiliated. She moved back to the counter, pulled out her phone, and opened the camera app. "Everyone with a phone, start recording," she called out to the gathering crowd of truckers peering through the windows. "Document everything. Faces, plates, patches, words, everything. Upload it to cloud storage immediately. If this goes south, we need evidence to survive what comes after." Nate found his voice. "Ava, maybe you should. There's a back door you could... Run." Ava shook her head. "That's what they want. Someone running looks guilty. Someone who runs can be hunted without witnesses." She turned to face the growing crowd of Reapers outside, now numbering 8 or 9, their bikes rumbling like distant thunder. But someone who stands their ground, documents everything, and waits for law enforcement, that's someone exercising their rights. That's someone who can prove self-defense. Ruth moved to stand beside her phone, still recording. Then Kim, trembling but determined, stepped out from behind the counter. Nate, after a moment's hesitation, grabbed a spare phone from behind the register and joined them. 4 people standing in a broken diner facing down a growing mob. Outside, Brick finished his phone call. He smiled a terrible expression, all teeth and malice. Then he pointed directly at Ava and drew his thumb across his throat. The universal gesture. The promise. Ava raised her phone and zoomed in, capturing the threat in high-definition GPS-stamped, time-coded admissible in any court in the country. The sirens were still distant. The Reapers were still arriving. And somewhere in the darkening Wyoming sky, the first stars were beginning to appear cold and distant and utterly indifferent to the small human drama playing out beneath them. Ava's back throbbed where the kick had landed. Her hands wanted to shake, but she wouldn't let them. She thought about her truck outside, about the open road that had always been her escape, about how easy it would be to just climb into that cab and drive until Wyoming was a memory. But she'd spent too many years teaching people to stand up to bullies. Too many years watching good people get crushed because they fought alone. Too many years knowing that running only worked until it didn't. "Kim," she said softly, "how's that coconut pie recipe of yours? You ever write it down?" Kim blinked, confused by the question. "I what? Your pie. It's really good. Seems like the kind of thing that should be preserved. Passed on." Ava smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. Be a shame if this place closed before you could teach someone else how to make it. Understanding dawned on Kim's face. This wasn't about pie. This was about stakes, about what they were protecting, about why they were standing here instead of scattering. "My grandmother's recipe," Kim said, her voice stronger now. "She made it through the fall of Saigon with that recipe in her head. Figured if it could survive that, it could survive anything." "Then I guess we better make sure it does," Ava replied. Outside, the reapers were forming up. Brick had cleaned most of the glass from his vest, though blood trickled from a cut above his eyebrow. The humiliation on his face had crystallized into something colder, more calculated. He was planning now, strategizing. This was going to get worse before it got better. Ruth moved closer to Ava, her voice barely a whisper. "You know what you've done, don't you? You've declared war on them. They can't let this stand. Their whole operation, their whole reputation depends on people being too afraid to fight back." "I know," Ava said, "but someone had to." 20 minutes until the sheriff arrives," Ruth continued. "A lot can happen in 20 minutes. Then we document it all." Ava checked her phone's battery again. Still good. "Every second, every word, every threat. We build a case so airtight that even if they walk away tonight, it follows them. We turn their intimidation into evidence, their threats into testimony." So Kim's 911 call was still connected, the dispatcher staying on the line. Good. Open line to emergency services. Every word being recorded on their end, too. The night settled in fully now, the parking lot lights casting harsh shadows across the assembled bikers. More engines rumbled in the distance. How many were coming? How big was this crew? Ava's mind raced through scenarios, through training, through every lesson she'd learned about surviving when the odds were against you. You couldn't outfight superior numbers, but you could outthink them. You could control the narrative. You could make them choose between their egos and their freedom. One of the reapers, younger than the others, barely 20, with "Prospect" written on his vest, approached the broken window. He held up a phone, playing back footage. Even from inside the diner, Ava could see it was Grit's video. The kick, the throw, Brick's flight through the air. The Prospect was uploading it. They all were. Ruth saw it too. "They're weaponizing the video, making you look like the aggressor." "Let them," Ava said. "Full context always wins. They kicked first. The assault is right there on camera. Everything I did was response, not initiation." But even as she said it, a cold knot formed in her stomach. Because viral videos didn't care about context. Social media didn't pause for legal nuance. By morning, that footage could be everywhere, edited, cropped, narrated by voices that would turn her from victim to villain. The court of public opinion moved faster than any judge. And the reapers knew it. Brick's smile widened as he watched his crew work their phones. He knew what was coming. The digital wildfire. The doxing. The threats that would pour in from keyboard warriors and armchair judges. The way the internet could take 15 seconds of video and turn someone's life into hell. Ava's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Nice throw, trucker bitch. Now everyone knows your face, your plates, where you were. You think the law can protect you? We're everywhere. Sleep tight." She showed it to Ruth, who paled. "They're fast." "Yeah." Ava screenshotted the threat, forwarded it to her email, to cloud storage, to 3 different backup services. But so am I. Another buzz. Another threat. Then another. The messages were multiplying, coming from different numbers, different sources, but all carrying the same message. You're exposed. You're vulnerable. You're ours. Kim's phone started buzzing too. Then Nate's. The Reapers had identified them in the videos, cross-referenced social media, and sicked their digital army on everyone involved. "This is insane," Nate whispered, staring at his screen. "They're threatening my diner, my business. They're saying they'll burn it down, leave reviews claiming we serve rat meat, file false health complaints. Screenshot everything." Ava cut him off. "Every threat, every message, build the file. Because here's what they don't understand. Every threat they make is evidence. Every message is a digital footprint. They're so focused on scaring us that they're creating their own prosecution." Sirens closer now, maybe 10 minutes out. Brick heard them too. His expression shifted, calculations running behind his eyes. Did they press now, get their revenge in the window before law enforcement arrived, or did they pull back, regroup, plan something more strategic? He raised his hand, and the Reaper's engines revved in response. A show of force. A reminder of numbers. Then Brick pointed at the diner at Ava and made a sweeping gesture. His crew understood. They spread out, surrounding the building. Not attacking, not yet, but positioning. Creating a perimeter, a siege. "They're boxing us in," Ruth observed. "Let them." Ava kept recording. Every position, every move, it's all evidence of coordinated intimidation. Conspiracy. These aren't random acts, this is organized criminal behavior. But even as she spoke, she felt the walls closing in. Because evidence only mattered if you survived to present it. And 10 minutes was still a long time when you were surrounded by angry men with weapons and grudges. Kim's voice wavered. "What do we do?" Ava looked at the young waitress, at her fear, her courage, her shaking hands, still holding the phone steady. She looked at Nate, at Ruth, at the truckers outside, who were filming through their windshields but not intervening, caught between wanting to help and knowing that numbers still favored the Reapers. "We hold," Ava said. "We document. We wait. And we show these bastards that intimidation only works if people stay silent." The sirens grew louder. The Reapers tightened their circle. And in that broken diner on the high plains of Wyoming, 4 people stood their ground against the gathering dark, armed with nothing but phone's truth and the stubborn belief that dignity was worth defending. Even when the odds said otherwise. The first sheriff's cruiser sliced through the parking lot, with lights painting everything in strobing blue and red, turning the standoff into something that looked like a nightclub for the damned. Sheriff Alana Ruiz stepped out before the vehicle had fully stopped. Her hand resting on her service weapon, but not drawing it, a calculated gesture that said, "I'm ready, but not looking for escalation." She was 46, compact and muscular, with silver threading through her black hair and eyes that had seen every flavor of human stupidity the high plains could produce. Ava watched from inside the diner as Ruiz surveyed the scene with the kind of methodical assessment that came from 20 years in law enforcement. The sheriff's gaze moved from the broken window to Brick still bleeding from his forehead to the semicircle of Reapers surrounding the building, then finally to Ava, standing behind the jagged glass teeth of the shattered frame. Their eyes met. Ruiz's expression gave away nothing. A second cruiser pulled in, then a third. 3 deputies emerged, hands near weapons forming a loose triangle that split the difference between the diner and the bikers. The math was still wrong. 3 deputies versus 9 or 10 Reapers, but the presence of badges changed the equation. Violence now came with legal consequences, with reports and investigations, and the machinery of the state grinding to life. Brick straightened, composing himself. The rage drained from his face, replaced by something more calculated. He was transforming before Ava's eyes from thug to victim, from aggressor to wounded party. His hand went to his bleeding forehead, touching it gingerly, making sure Ruiz saw the blood. "Sheriff!" Brick's voice carried across the parking lot, pitched perfectly for injured innocence. "Thank God you're here. This crazy woman attacked me, threw me through a window for no reason. I want to press charges." Ava's stomach dropped. Here it came, the narrative, flip the rewriting of reality that happened when someone knew how to work the system. Ruiz held up one hand. "Nobody's pressing anything until I get statements. Everyone stays exactly where they are." She turned to her deputies. "Martinez, get medical on the way for anyone who needs it. Chen, start photographing the scene. Lewis, I want you taking preliminary statements from witnesses." Her gaze swept across the Reapers. "And I mean actual witnesses, people who saw what happened, not people who rolled up after the fact." One of the Reapers, the young prospect, started to speak, but Brick shot him a look that could strip paint. The kid's mouth snapped shut. Ruiz walked toward the diner, her boots crunching on broken glass. She stopped at the window frame, looking at Ava through the gap. "You want to tell me what happened here?" "Self-defense," Ava said simply. "I have video evidence, multiple angles, time-stamped, Jeeps tagged." Brick's carefully constructed victim persona cracked for just a second, fury flashing through, before he wrestled it back under control. "Convenient," Brick called out. "Real convenient that you just happened to be recording." "I wasn't," Ava replied, not breaking eye contact with Ruiz. "But Dr. Ruth Calder was, and so was one of your crew fellow named Grit, I think. His footage shows your man-torch kicking me in the back while I was sitting at the counter. Everything after that was response to assault." Ruiz's eyebrow lifted fractionally. She turned to look at Grit, who suddenly found his boots extremely interesting. "That true? You got footage of the incident?" Grit's hand moved protectively toward his phone. "I'm going to need that phone," Ruiz said. "Evidence in an assault investigation." I wasn't," Grit stammered. "Son, you can hand it over now or I can get a warrant and we do this the hard way. Your choice." Ruiz's voice was flat, bored, even like she'd had this exact conversation 1,000 times and knew exactly how it would end. Brick stepped forward. "Sheriff, with all due respect, we don't have to cooperate with— Actually, you do." Ruiz cut him off. "You called this in as an assault. That makes it my investigation. That means I collect evidence. That means phone statements, the works." She paused, letting it sink in. "Unless you want to withdraw your complaint, say it was all a misunderstanding and you folks were just leaving." The trap was beautiful in its simplicity. Brick could either cooperate, which meant turning over video evidence that would sink his narrative, or he could back down, which meant losing face in front of his crew and admitting the whole thing was bullshit. Ava watched the calculations run behind Brick's eyes. He was smart enough to see the corner Ruiz had painted him into, but too proud to take the exit she'd offered. "We're cooperating," Brick said finally, each word costing him. "Because we got nothing to hide. That woman assaulted me, and your evidence will prove it." Ruiz nodded, unsurprised. "Martinez collect phones from everyone who was inside or immediately outside the diner at the time of the incident. Chain of custody forms for everything." She turned back to Ava. "I'm going to need your phone, too." Ava had expected this. "Already uploaded everything to 3 separate cloud services. You can have the phone, but I want a receipt and a timeline for when I get it back." "Fair enough." Ruiz pulled out a notepad. "Start from the beginning. Everything that happened from the moment you arrived." Ava recounted it all, the blocked handicap spaces, the harassment of Kim, the escalating threats, torches, kick her response. Her voice was steady, factual, empty of emotion. Just the facts delivered like a mission report. Ruth corroborated from her position, adding details Ava had missed. Kim, still shaking, but determined, confirmed the timeline. Nate provided the context, how the Reapers had been coming through for the past month, each visit more aggressive than the last, how they'd been testing boundaries, seeing what they could get away with. "Why didn't you call us before tonight?" Ruiz asked. Nate's laugh was bitter. "And say what, that some bikers were rude, that they made my waitress uncomfortable. You're 20 minutes away on a good day, Sheriff. By the time you got here, they'd be gone, and we'd be the ones who looked paranoid." Ruiz's jaw tightened. She knew he was right. Rural law enforcement was a game of triage. You responded to emergencies and let everything else sort itself out because there simply weren't enough hours or deputies to handle every brewing situation. Deputy Chen approached, camera in hand. "Sheriff, you need to see this." She held up the camera's display screen showing close-ups of the parking lot. Every single bike is parked illegally. ADA violations across the board. And look at this. She zoomed in on one of the motorcycles. Modified exhaust, no proper baffling. That's a noise ordinance violation. And this one? She moved to another bike. Expired registration. And this patch here? She indicated the Road Reapers logo on several vests. Matches a gang designation in our database, classified as a criminal organization in 3 states. Ruiz studied the photos, her expression thoughtful. What states? Colorado, Nebraska, and Montana, connected to trafficking, extortion, and organized theft. The pieces started falling into place for Ava. This wasn't random harassment. This was probing, testing a location, testing the people, seeing if Red Butte could be claimed as territory. Ruiz seemed to reach the same conclusion. "Brick, is it?" She turned to the biker leader. "I'm going to need to see ID from everyone in your crew, and registration for every vehicle in this lot. We're the victims here." Brick's control was slipping again. "She threw me through a goddamn window." "After your associate assaulted her," Ruiz countered, "which means she's got a self-defense claim, and you've got a conspiracy to commit assault problem. Now IDs. Or we can do this downtown with lawyers present. Your call." The standoff stretched. Ava could feel the tension building again, a rubber band pulled to its breaking point. The Reapers were trapped between their pride and the legal reality closing in around them. Finally, Brick pulled out his wallet. His crew followed suit, reluctance written across every face. Deputy Martinez collected IDs, running them through the computer in her cruiser. The radio chatter was too quiet for Ava to hear, but she could read Martinez's body language, the way her posture stiffened, the way her hand drifted toward her weapon again. Martinez approached Ruiz, voice low but urgent. "Sheriff, we got 3 outstanding warrants in this group. 2 for failure to appear on traffic violations, 1 for..." She glanced at the Reapers. "1 for assault with a deadly weapon out of Colorado." Ruiz's hand moved to her radio. "Dispatch, this is Sheriff Ruiz. I need backup at Nate's Diner, mile marker 214. Multiple subjects with active warrants. Possible organized criminal activity." The atmosphere ignited. Reapers started backing toward their bikes. Engines fired up. Ruiz's deputies moved to intercept hands on weapons. Now the pretense of calm shattered. "Nobody moves," Ruiz's voice cracked like thunder. "You run this goes from warrants to felony evasion. That's prison time, not county jail." The Reapers froze, caught between instinct and consequence. Brick's face was purple with rage. He locked eyes with Ava across the parking lot, and his voice carried clear and cold. "You think this ends tonight? You think badges protect you forever?" He smiled, and it was worse than his anger. "We know where you are now. We know your truck, your plates. We got time. All the time in the world." "That's a threat," Ruiz said sharply. "Made in front of law enforcement. You want to add witness intimidation to your charges." But Brick wasn't looking at Ruiz anymore. He was looking at Ava, at Kim, at Nate, memorizing faces, making promises with his eyes. 2 more cruisers arrived, lights blazing. The deputies moved with practiced efficiency, separating the Reapers with warrants from the rest. Handcuffs clicked. Miranda rights were read in monotone voices that had delivered them 1,000 times before. 3 Reapers were loaded into cruisers. Brick wasn't one of them. His record was clean in Wyoming, at least officially. But 7 others remained standing by their bikes, watching their brothers get taken away. Ruiz approached Ava again. "I need you to come to the station tomorrow. Full statement, formal evidence submission. And I'm going to be straight with you, this isn't over. These guys don't forget. They don't forgive. And arresting 3 of them tonight just made you a bigger target." "I know," Ava said quietly. "No, I don't think you do." Ruiz's voice was grim. "The Road Reapers aren't just a motorcycle club. They're a criminal network. We've been tracking them for 2 years, but they're careful. They insulate their leadership use prospects for the dirty work, keep their hands clean. What you did tonight, humiliating Brick in front of his crew, getting his men arrested, that's a declaration of war in their world." "So what should I have done?" Ava's voice had an edge now. "Let them kick me. Let them terrorize Kim. Let them turn this place into their personal playground." Ruiz was quiet for a moment. "No. You did the right thing. I'm just making sure you understand the cost." The remaining Reapers mounted their bikes. Brick was the last to leave, starting his engine with a roar that echoed across the empty plains. He revved it once, twice, 3 times, a promise, a threat, a declaration. Then they were gone, taillights disappearing into the Wyoming night. The deputies finished their work, photographing everything, taking final statements, loading evidence bags into their cruisers. Ruiz handed Ava a card with the station's address and her direct line. "Lock your doors tonight," Ruiz said. "Stay visible. Keep documenting everything. And Ava, get yourself a lawyer, someone who knows criminal defense. Because when this goes to court, they're going to come after you with everything they've got." The cruisers pulled out one by one, leaving the diner in sudden ringing silence. The neon sign flickered, casting pink and blue shadows across the broken glass scattered in the parking lot. Ava, Kim, Ruth, and Nate stood together processing what had just happened. Kim was the first to break. Her legs gave out, and she sat down hard on the diner's step, her whole body shaking with delayed shock. Oh God, what did we just do?" Ruth sat beside her, wrapping an arm around the younger woman's shoulders. "We stood up. That's what we did." "They're going to come back," Kim whispered. "You heard him. They know where we are." "They knew where we were before tonight," Ava said. She was running on adrenaline now, her tactical mind already planning next steps. "The only difference is now we have evidence. Now we have a record. Now when they try something, it's not our word against theirs. It's documented patterns of criminal behavior." Nate was staring at his broken window, calculating costs. "Insurance won't cover this. Act of violence clause. And even if they did, my premiums would skyrocket." He ran a hand through his thinning hair. "I can't afford to board up and wait for claims. I've got suppliers who need payment this week, payroll Friday." "How much?" Ruth asked abruptly. "What? How much to get the window fixed and keep the diner running?" Nate did quick math in his head. $3,000, maybe $4,000 for the window. Another $2,000 to cover cash flow until insurance sorts itself out. If it sorts itself out. Ruth pulled out her phone and started typing. "I've got savings. $6,000 should handle it." "Ruth, I can't. You're not taking it, I'm investing it." Ruth cut him off. "This diner is the only decent place to eat in 60 miles. And more than that, it's the only place that just proved bullies don't own this town." She looked at each of them in turn. We hold this line or they take everything. It's that simple. Ava felt something shift in her chest. This was how resistance started, not with grand plans or coordinated movements, but with small groups of ordinary people deciding that enough was enough. I've got tools in my rig, Ava said. Plywood too. I carry spare sheets for cargo loads. We can board up tonight, get a proper window ordered tomorrow. Kim wiped her eyes, pulling herself together with visible effort. I've got every video saved to 3 different cloud accounts, time-stamped, location tagged. I also... She paused, something like pride creeping into her voice. I've been keeping a log. Every time they came in, what they said, what they did. Dates times witnesses. Started it 3 weeks ago when Brick first showed up. Ava turned to stare at the young waitress. You've been documenting them for 3 weeks. My uncle was a journalist in Vietnam before he got out, Kim said. He taught me when powerful people try to scare you, you write it down. You make a record. Because memory is unreliable, but documentation is forever. Kim, Ruth said slowly. Do you still have those logs? Every single entry. Why? Because that's not just documentation. Ava said, her mind racing ahead. That's evidence of a pattern. That's proof of ongoing criminal harassment. That's the difference between tonight being an isolated incident and it being part of a conspiracy. Nate was looking at Kim with new eyes. You never said anything. Never told me you were tracking them. I didn't want to worry you, Kim admitted. And I didn't know if it would matter. If anyone would care about what some waitress noticed. It matters, Ava said firmly. It all matters. Can you share those logs with me? With Ruth. We need to compile everything. Your documentation, tonight's videos. Any other evidence into one comprehensive file. I can do that. Kim pulled out her phone, fingers flying across the screen. Sending it now. Ava's phone buzzed as the files arrived. She opened the first log entry, and her blood went cold. October 4th, 2025, 6:47 p.m. 5 men in Road Reaper's vests entered diner. Leader, later identified as Brick, ordered coffee, sat for 2 hours without ordering food. Made comments about nice little operation and shame if something happened to it. Manager Nate asked them to order or leave. Brick responded, We're customers, aren't we? You can't throw out customers. They left at 8:52 p.m. after receiving phone call. Heard Brick say, Yeah, same setup as Rollins. This one's ripe. Rollins, Ava said aloud. That's a town about 80 miles east of here. Ruth, what do you know about it? Ruth's face was grim. Truck stop closed down 6 months ago. Owner said he couldn't afford to keep operating after a series of incidents. Vandalism, customer harassment, mysterious health code violations. The Reapers, Ava said. It wasn't a question. Nobody could prove it, Ruth replied. But everyone knew. Ava scrolled through more of Kim's logs. A pattern emerged, the Reapers probing, testing, escalating. They'd tried intimidation, low-level harassment, waiting to see if anyone would push back. And when nobody did, they got bolder. Until tonight. They've done this before, Ava said. Multiple towns, same playbook. They identify vulnerable businesses, apply pressure until the owners either pay protection money or close down. Then they move and control the territory, use it for whatever their larger operation needs. What operation? Nate asked. Ava thought about the conversation she'd overheard between Brick and the suit, about the references in Kim's logs to phone calls and shipments. I don't know yet, but it's bigger than just shaking down diners. Her phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. She braced for another threat, but the message was different. You don't know what you're messing with. The Reapers are just the front. There's someone bigger behind them. Someone with real power. Get out while you can." Ava showed it to the others. "That's not a threat," Ruth observed. "That's a warning." "From who?" Kim asked. "Someone who knows something we don't." Ava screenshotted the message, added it to their evidence file. "Someone on the inside, maybe, or someone who got burned by them before." They spent the next hour boarding up the window, working mostly in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. The plywood went up fast. Ava's experience with cargo loads translated well to basic construction. By midnight, the diner was secured, the glass swept up, the immediate crisis managed. But as they stood back to survey their work, Ava couldn't shake the feeling that they were just at the beginning. The Reapers had been embarrassed, exposed, arrested. Men like Brick didn't forget slights like that. They festered, planned, came back harder. "You should all stay somewhere else tonight," Ava said. "Hotels, friends, places, anywhere but your homes. They've got your information from the videos. They know where to find you." "I'm not leaving my diner," Nate said stubbornly. "I'm not leaving Nate," Ruth added. Kim hesitated, then shook her head. "If we run, they win. They get to control our lives through fear. I won't give them that." Ava wanted to argue to explain tactical retreat and strategic positioning. But she understood their logic because it was the same logic keeping her here instead of climbing into her rig and driving until Wyoming was just another state in her rearview mirror. "Then we set up a watch system," Ava said. "Rotating shifts. Someone awake at all times. Phones charge 911 on speed dial cameras running continuously. At the first sign of trouble, we call Ruiz." They organized themselves with the efficiency of people who'd just survived a crisis together. Ruth took first watch. She was a night owl anyway, decades of graveyard shifts in emergency services having rewired her circadian rhythm. Kim would relieve her at 3 a.m. Nate at 6 a.m. Ava would float, checking in remotely from her truck parked where she could see the diner's entrance. As they were finalizing the plan, Nate's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, frowned, and answered. "This is Nate." His face went white as he listened. "What?" "No, that's... When did this... Yes, I'll come in first thing tomorrow. Yes. Thank you for calling." He lowered the phone hands, shaking. "The bank," he said hollowly. "They're reviewing my loan, effective immediately. Something about significant police activity at the business location triggering a risk assessment clause." His voice cracked. "They could call the whole thing due, 30 days to pay off $100,000 to $80,000, or they take the diner." The room went silent. This wasn't random. This wasn't coincidence. "They got to your bank," Ava said slowly. "The Reapers, or whoever's behind them, they're applying pressure through official channels now." "How?" Kim asked. "How could they influence a bank?" Ruth's expression was dark. "Money talks. Could be bribes, could be threats, could be someone at the bank is on their payroll. Small-town institutions, everybody knows everybody. All it takes is one person in the right position." Nate sank onto a stool, the fight draining out of him. "I can't fight a bank. I can't fight loan clauses and risk assessments and legal procedures. I'm just a diner owner." "No," Ava said firmly. She knelt in front of Nate, forcing him to meet her eyes. "You're a man who's been serving this community for 30 years. You're an employer who gave Kim a chance when she needed it. You're the owner of the only independent business for 60 miles that had the guts to stand up to criminals. That's not just anything." "But the money, we document this too," Ava interrupted. "The timing is too perfect to be coincidence. Bank calls within hours of the police report. That's retaliation. That's witness intimidation through financial pressure. That's another charge to add to the pile." Ruth was already on her phone again. "I know a lawyer in Cheyenne. Civil rights work mainly, but she's got experience with financial institutions. Let me make some calls." Kim moved to stand beside Nate, her hand on his shoulder. We're not letting them take this place. They want us scared and scattered. We give them the opposite. Ava stood, her tactical mind shifting gears. They couldn't just play defense anymore. Defense meant slowly losing ground, slowly getting ground down by attrition. They needed to go on offense, not violently, but legally, strategically. Kim, I need you to go through those logs again, Ava said. Every reference to Rollins, to other towns, to shipments or operations. We need to understand the full scope of what the Reapers are doing. On it. Ruth, besides the lawyer, see if you can find any other business owners who've had problems with the Reapers. People who might be willing to share their stories if they knew they weren't alone. I'll start making calls at a decent hour. Nate, when you go to the bank tomorrow, record everything. Every word, every document they show you. And don't sign anything without that lawyer reviewing it first. Nate nodded, some of the color returning to his face. Having action items, having a plan, seemed to help. Ava's own phone buzzed again. This time it was an email notification. The sender was anonymous, but the subject line made her pulse quicken. "RE, what you stepped in." She opened it. The Reapers run a parts pipeline. Stolen motorcycles and trucks chopped in Montana parts distributed through legitimate shops in 5 states. They need locations like Nate's places to stage shipments where trucks stop regularly, and nobody asks questions about extra cargo. Rollins refused to play along. Look what happened to them. You've made yourself a problem. Expect them to solve you the same way. A test shipment is scheduled to pass through Red Butte within 48 hours. If you want proof of the operation, that's your chance. But be careful. People who've tried to expose this before have a way of disappearing. Good luck. You're going to need it. Ava read it 3 times, her mind racing. Anonymous tipster. Could be legitimate. Could be a trap. Could be someone trying to manipulate them into a vulnerable position. But if it was true, we've got a lead, she said, showing the email to the others. Anonymous source claiming the Reapers run a stolen parts pipeline. Says there's a test shipment coming through here in the next 2 days. That's convenient timing, Ruth said skeptically. How do we know this isn't them setting us up? We don't, Ava admitted. But look at the pattern. Kim's logs mention shipments. The Reapers have been scouting locations with regular truck traffic. Brick's conversation about Red Butte being ripe, that fits a distribution network looking for staging points. If there is a shipment, Nate said slowly, and we could document it, prove the connection between the Reapers and organized crime, it stops being he said, she said, Ava finished. It becomes a federal case. Interstate trafficking, organized criminal enterprise, the works. That brings in resources way beyond what Sheriff Ruiz can marshal. Kim was already pulling up traffic patterns on her phone. There are only 3 routes through Red Butte that make sense for moving cargo. Interstate 80 is the obvious one, but there's also County Road 17 and the old mining access road. We can't watch all 3, Ruth pointed out. We don't have to watch, Ava said. We have to be ready to document when they make their move. If this tipster is legitimate, they'll come to the diner. It's the only staging point that makes sense. We were supposed to be softened up by now, compliant, too scared to ask questions about extra trucks in the lot. But we're not, Kim said. No, Ava agreed. We're not. They refined their plan, adding layers for the potential shipment. More cameras, better positioning coordination with Ruiz, though they'd have to be careful about that. If there was someone on the inside feeding information to the Reapers involving too many officials, could tip them off. By 2 in the morning, they'd done all they could. Ruth settled into her watch position with a thermos of coffee and her phone. Kim headed to the small apartment above the diner. Nate retreated to his office, still shaken but functioning. Ava walked out to her truck, her back still aching from Torch's kick. She climbed into the cab, and sat for a moment in the darkness processing everything that had happened. 12 hours ago, she'd just been a trucker looking for pie and coffee. Now she was in the middle of something that sprawled across state lines, involved organized crime, financial intimidation, and anonymous informants. She should leave. Every rational instinct screamed at her to fire up the engine and roll out. This wasn't her fight. This wasn't her town. But then she thought about Kim's shaking hands becoming steady as she stood her ground, about Nate's quiet dignity in the face of threats, about Ruth's fierce protectiveness of her community, about the principle that someone somewhere had to draw a line and say no further. Her phone lit up with one final message, this one from a number she recognized, Sheriff Ruiz. "Off the record, you kicked a hornet's nest tonight. The Reapers have connections we're still mapping. Watch yourself. And if that anonymous tip pans out, call me before you do anything stupid. We need clean evidence for prosecution, not vigilante heroics." Ava typed back, "I need evidence, not heroics. Understood." She hit send, then leaned back in her seat, staring at the boarded-up diner illuminated by the parking lot lights. Somewhere out there, Brick was planning. The Reapers were regrouping, and whoever was pulling their strings was adjusting their strategy. 48 hours until a test shipment. 48 hours to turn the tables. Ava closed her eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. Her mind was already running scenarios, planning contingencies, preparing for the next move in a game where the stakes were someone else's livelihood, and maybe their lives. Outside, the Wyoming wind picked up, carrying the smell of sage and distant rain. In the darkness, coyotes called to each other, wild, free, and utterly indifferent to the small human dramas playing out beneath the endless sky. But Ava wasn't indifferent. Not anymore. She'd drawn her line in the dust. Now she had to hold it. The pre-dawn cold bit through Ava's jacket as she stood in the diner's parking lot at 5:47 a.m., her breath forming small clouds in the crystalline air. She'd managed maybe 90 minutes of sleep in her cab, fitful dream-haunted rest, filled with the sound of breaking glass and Brick's smile. Her body ached the bruise on her lower back, now a spectacular purple-black bloom that throbbed with each movement. But pain was information, and right now it was telling her she was still in the fight. Nate's truck pulled in just as the first gray light touched the horizon. He looked like he'd aged a decade, overnight dark circles under his eyes, shoulders hunched against more than just the cold. Behind him came Ruth's sedan. Then Kim on foot from the apartment above the diner, wrapped in a coat 2 sizes too big. They gathered without speaking at first, 4 people connected now by something deeper than circumstance, by choice, by the shared understanding that they'd crossed a threshold, and there was no going back. "The fuel pumps," Nate said finally, his voice rough with exhaustion. He was staring at the 2 diesel pumps that served the truckers who stopped here. "I went to check the overnight receipts. Someone's been at them." Ava's tactical awareness snapped to full alert. "Show me." They walked to the pumps together, Nate pulling a flashlight from his pocket. In the growing light, Ava could see the access panel on pump 2 was slightly ajar, the security seal broken. She knelt down, careful not to touch anything, and peered inside. The filter assembly had been tampered with, connections loosened just enough to introduce contaminants. "Sugar?" Ruth asked, reading Ava's expression. "Or sand? Something to wreck an engine?" Ava stood her mind calculating the implications. "When did you last check these?" "Yesterday afternoon around 4. Before everything—" Nate's voice caught. "Before they showed up." "So, sometime between last night and this morning someone came back." Ava pulled out her phone, started photographing everything. "They couldn't get to us directly, so they went after the business. Poison the fuel, destroy some trucker's engine, word gets out that Nate's pumps are bad, nobody stops here anymore. Kim was already on her phone. I'm calling Sheriff Ruiz. Wait. Ava held up a hand. First we document everything. Photos, timestamps, measurements. Then we call. And Nate, you need to shut down these pumps immediately. Put up out-of-order signs. The last thing we need is someone actually using contaminated fuel. Nate moved to comply, his hands shaking as he flipped the emergency shutoff switches. The pumps went silent, their digital displays going dark. He found some plastic caution tape in the storage shed and wrapped the pump handles, then added handwritten signs, "Out of order, do not use." Ruth was walking the perimeter, her paramedic training showing in the systematic way she checked for other sabotage. She stopped at the dumpster area, her posture going rigid. Ava, Nate, you need to see this. Behind the dumpster, someone had spray-painted a message in dripping red letters across the back wall of the diner. Pay or burn. The words seemed to pulse in the morning light, a threat made permanent. Ava photographed it from multiple angles, while Nate just stared, his face ashen. They came back, he whispered, while we were inside, while Ruth was watching. They were right here, and we didn't know. Ruth was watching the front, Ava said. They came around back, kept to the shadows. Military tactical approach probe for weak points, strike where you're not defended, leave a message to demoralize. She met Nate's eyes. This is psychological warfare. They want you scared. They want you to feel helpless. It's working, Nate admitted. Kim's voice cut through from near the front. Guys, the cameras. The new ones we set up last night. They're gone. They rushed to the front entrance. Sure enough, the 3 security cameras they'd positioned were missing, torn from their mounts. Only the original diner camera remained old obvious, and now clearly inadequate. They scouted us, Ruth said. Watched where we put the new cameras, came back and removed them. That means they were close last night, watching, waiting. Ava's phone buzzed. Another anonymous message. Told you. They don't forget. They don't forgive. The shipment arrives tonight. Last chance to walk away. She showed it to the others. Kim's face set in determined lines. We're not walking. No, Ava agreed. But we're adapting. They took our cameras, so we go covert. Hidden cameras, ones they can't see, to remove. And we expand our network. We need more eyes, more people documenting. The truckers, Ruth said suddenly. The ones who were filming last night. They've got dash cams, some have full rig cameras. If we can coordinate with them. A mobile surveillance network, Ava finished. They can't steal cameras from trucks that are constantly moving. And truckers talk CB radio truck stops, the whole informal network. Word's probably already spreading about last night. Nate was on his phone now, scrolling through contacts. I know maybe a dozen drivers who stop here regular. Good people. Let me make some calls. While Nate worked his network, Ava called Sheriff Ruiz. The conversation was brief, professional, and frustrating. Ruiz would send a deputy to document the vandalism and sabotage, but she was frank about the limitations. We can't post a guard 24/7. Ruiz said. I don't have the manpower. Best I can do is increase patrol frequency, but that's still only a couple of drive-bys per shift. What about the FBI? Ava pressed. If the Reapers are running an interstate trafficking operation. I've reached out. They're interested but need more than anonymous tips and local vandalism. They need hard evidence of federal crimes, proof of the pipeline documentation of interstate commerce and stolen goods financial records. Right now, all we've got is property damage and assault charges. Ava understood the bureaucratic reality, but it still grated. The shipment tonight, if we can document it. If it's real, and if you can get clean evidence without compromising yourselves, yes, that could be the break we need. Ruiz paused. But Ava, these people have already shown they're willing to escalate. Sabotage, Intimidation. Now they're operating in your blind spots. Don't be a hero. Call us the second anything starts. After the call ended, Ava found herself staring at the boarded window, the spray-painted threat, the disabled fuel pumps. The Reapers were executing a classic intimidation campaign, multiple pressure points, public and private, legal and illegal, all designed to overwhelm their target's ability to respond. But they'd made a mistake. They'd assumed Nate was isolated, that his allies were few and uncommitted. They hadn't counted on Kim's meticulous documentation. They hadn't anticipated Ruth's fierce loyalty. And they certainly hadn't expected Ava, someone with training experience, and the kind of stubborn determination that came from teaching people to survive ambushes. By 8 a.m., 5 trucks had pulled into the lot, their drivers responding to Nate's calls. Ava recognized the type, immediately owner-operators, independent haulers who lived by a code that said, "You helped your own." They gathered in the diner, filling the booths where the Reapers had sat hours before, and listened as Nate explained the situation. "So you need eyes," said a driver named Marcus, a barrel-chested black man in his 50s who'd been running routes through Wyoming for 30 years. "You need a perimeter without looking like you got a perimeter." "Exactly," Ava confirmed. "We can do that." Marcus pulled out his phone, opened a CB radio app. "There's maybe 20 drivers who come through Red Butte regular. We set up a rotation, always 2 or 3 rigs in the lot, engines off, drivers resting, but cameras running. Anyone asks, we're just on our mandatory rest breaks." A younger driver, Sarah, leaned forward. "My rig's got 6 cameras, front, rear, both sides, cab, interior, and cargo. Full 1080p cloud backup. I can park where I've got sight lines on the whole lot. I've got thermal imaging," added a grizzled driver named Pete. "Deer spotting camera I mounted for night driving. Can see heat signatures 300 yards out." The plan took shape organically, drivers contributing their capabilities, building a surveillance web that would be nearly invisible to anyone not looking for it. They established a CB channel 19 for normal chatter, but channel 32 for security comms with a code word system. Sunset meant start recording, but don't engage. Sunrise meant law enforcement inbound. Midnight meant immediate danger, all hands respond. Kim was documenting everything, creating a spreadsheet of who would be where and when, contact information, camera specifications. Her organizational skills were transforming chaos into strategy. "What about the shipment?" Sarah asked. "If it's real, if it comes through tonight, what's the play?" "We record," Ava said firmly. "Document everything. Vehicles, plates, faces, what's being transferred. But we do not engage. We do not confront. We are witnesses, not warriors. This has to be clean, admissible evidence," Ruth spoke up from her corner booth. "And if they spot you, if they realize they're being recorded, then we scatter," Marcus said. "Trucks can move fast when we need to. And try stopping 10 rigs once we're rolling. We'll be in 6 different counties before they figure out which one to chase." But Ava could see the flaw in the plan, the vulnerable point that kept nagging at her. "They'll come for the diner. If they realize we're onto them, they'll assume this is the coordination point. Nate, Kim, you'll be exposed." "So we move the coordination point," Kim said. She pulled up a map on her phone. "Ruth's place is 3 miles out off the main road. We set up their computer's phone's monitoring station, real-time feeds from the trucks. If things go bad at the diner, the evidence is already safe." Ruth nodded approval. "My house is defensible. Single access road, clear sight lines, and I've got a gun safe with enough firepower to hold off an army if it comes to that." "It won't come to that," Ava said quickly. "This stays peaceful. This stays legal." But even as she said it, she felt the weight of doubt. The Reapers had already proven they'd escalate. The sabotage overnight showed they were probing, testing, looking for ways to hurt without direct confrontation. How far would they go? Nate's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, and his face went pale. "It's the bank. They want me to come in right now for an emergency review of my loan status." "Don't go alone," Ruth said immediately. "Call that lawyer I mentioned. Have her meet you there, or at least be on speakerphone." "I can't afford—" "I told you I'm covering it. This is an investment in keeping this diner open." Ruth was already texting. "Linda's good. She'll smell the rat in this setup from a mile away." While Nate made his call, Ava stepped outside with Marcus. The sun was fully up now, harsh and bright, revealing the parking lot in unforgiving detail. The spray paint looked even more menacing in daylight. "You know this is going to get worse before it gets better," Marcus said quietly. "I know. And you're still staying." Ava thought about the question, about the easy answer that would get her back in her truck and on the road. About the conversation she'd had with herself 1,000 times, in 1,000 different situations, about knowing when to hold and when to fold, about picking battles, about self-preservation. "I'm staying," she said. Marcus studied her face, reading something there. "You got that look? Seen it before in military folks. Like you're not just fighting this fight, you're fighting all the other ones you had to walk away from." He wasn't wrong. Ava had left the army because she'd grown tired of following orders that led good people into bad situations. She'd become a trucker, to be free, autonomous, responsible only to herself. But freedom without purpose was just drift, and she'd been drifting for 2 years. "Someone has to stand," she said simply. "Then we stand with you." Marcus offered his hand, and she shook it, a covenant sealed with calloused palm against calloused palm. "But let's be smart about it. Pride's worth fighting for, but dying for it is just stupid." Back inside, Nate was off the phone, looking marginally better. "Linda's meeting me at the bank in an hour. She says the timing of this review is legally questionable, possible retaliatory action based on protected activity. If the bank can't show legitimate business reasons for the review, they could be liable." "Good," Ruth said. "You go handle that. Kim, you're with me. We're setting up the command center at my place. Ava, you coordinate the truckers, get the surveillance network locked down." They were moving now, transitioning from reactive to proactive. The Reapers had made their move overnight, but daylight belonged to preparation, to building defenses, to turning weakness into strength. As the group dispersed to their tasks, Ava's phone buzzed again. Another message, but this one made her blood run cold. "You think you're so smart with your cameras and your trucker friends, but you're missing the obvious. Who do you think called the bank? Who do you think told them about the police activity? Someone Nate knows. Someone he trusts. Check the phone logs from last night. See who made calls right after the sheriff left. Sweet dreams, trucker girl." Ava read it twice, feeling the implications sink in like stones in water. A mole. Someone on the inside. Someone who'd been feeding information to the Reapers, maybe for weeks. She looked at Kim, at Nate, preparing to leave, at Ruth, organizing equipment. Any one of them could be the leak. Or it could be someone else, a deputy, a dispatcher, someone in the bank itself. The paranoia the message was designed to create started spreading through her thoughts like poison. No, she couldn't let this tactic work. Divide and conquer was the oldest play in the book. Make them suspicious of each other, erode trust, fracture the group from within. But she also couldn't ignore the possibility entirely. Ava pulled up the call logs from last night on her phone, looking at timestamps. Ruth had made 3 calls after the sheriff left, but Ava had been standing right there, had heard the conversations. One to the lawyer, Linda, one to her nephew, checking in, one to a friend, asking about vandalism at other businesses. Kim had made 2 calls, both to family members, letting them know she was safe. Nate had made 7 calls. to truckers to his supplier about the fuel pumps to his insurance company. All explainable, all seemingly legitimate. But there was a gap. Between 11:47 p.m. and 11:53 p.m., Nate's phone showed outgoing call activity, but when she'd asked him to account for his calls earlier, he'd only mentioned 6. What was the 7th call? Ava's stomach twisted. Nate, who'd built this diner with his own hands. Nate, who'd stood with them against the Reapers. Nate, who now stood to lose everything to a bank review that came with suspicious timing. She couldn't confront him directly. Not yet. Not without more information. If he was innocent, accusations would shatter the fragile trust they'd built. If he was guilty, if he'd been compromised, somehow a direct confrontation would just make him more careful, harder to catch. She forwarded the anonymous message to a separate secure folder, then deleted it from her main screen. Need-to-know basis. She'd investigate quietly, carefully, and pray she was wrong. Marcus stuck his head in the door. Ava, we got a situation. Deputy just pulled up to the fuel pumps. Says he needs to impound them as evidence, which means shutting down fuel service indefinitely. Ava stepped outside to find Deputy Chen examining the tampered pumps while making notes on a tablet. How long will they be impounded? Ava asked. Chen didn't look up. Hard to say. Could be days, could be weeks. Depends on the lab schedule, the investigation timeline. These are evidence in a felony vandalism case now. That'll kill the business, Ava said. Half of Nate's revenue comes from fuel sales. I understand, but this is procedure. Chen finally met her eyes, and there was something there, sympathy maybe, or understanding. Look off the record, Sheriff Ruiz is trying to build a case, but every time we think we've got something solid, it slips away. The Reapers are careful. They use cutouts proxies, people who don't connect back to them directly. This vandalism, the spray paint, the sabotage, we can prove it happened, but proving who did it is harder. What about last night, the arrests? The 3 we picked up. 2 made bail this morning. 3rd one's still in custody, but his lawyer's already filing motions. And the warrants, we arrested them on minor stuff. They'll plea down, pay fines, be back on the street by end of week. Chen closed her tablet. I'm not trying to discourage you. I'm trying to be realistic. The system works, but it works slowly. Meanwhile, these guys can keep pressure on you in ways that are hard to prosecute. Ava absorbed this recalculating. The legal path was necessary, but insufficient. They needed the smoking gun, the shipment, the direct evidence of major crimes that would bring federal resources and serious charges. The shipment, Ava said carefully. If it's real, if it happens tonight, what would you need from us to make it stick? Chen glanced around, making sure they were alone. Clear video of the transfer. Faces, plates, what's being moved. Audio, if you can get it, conversations that establish knowledge and intent. And most importantly, chain of custody for the evidence. Everything time-stamped, location tagged, authenticated. No gaps, no questions about tampering. And if we get that, then we've got a case the FBI can't ignore. Interstate trafficking, organized crime, the works. Chen's expression hardened. But getting it without getting hurt, that's the trick. These guys play for keeps, Ava. They've put people in hospitals before. Some who crossed them didn't make it out of the hospital. After Chen left with samples from the fuel pumps, Ava gathered the truckers for a final briefing. The surveillance rotation was set 2 rigs in the lot at all times, cameras rolling, drivers ready to move. Ruth's place was being equipped as the command center with laptops showing live feeds from the trucks, phones ready to coordinate responses. Sarah pulled Ava aside as the group dispersed. That message you got, about someone on the inside. You think it's real? You saw it, saw your face when you read it, saw you check phone logs after. Sarah's eyes were sharp behind her glasses. I drive solo cross-country sometimes through places where being a woman alone is a risk. I've learned to read people to spot when something's off. So I'm asking, do we have a leak? Ava made a decision. She needed allies, and Sarah's instincts seemed sound. Maybe. I can't prove it. Can't even narrow down who. But the timing of that bank call, the way the Reapers seem to know our moves, it fits. So what do? We compartmentalize. Different people get different pieces of information. We track who knows what, and if there's another leak, we can triangulate back to the source. Sarah nodded slowly. You've done this before. This kind of operational security. Army taught me a lot of things. Most of them I hoped I'd never use again. Ava's smile was grim. But here we are. They spent the next hour implementing information controls. The full plan for tonight, the surveillance positions, the coordination protocols, the evidence collection strategy was divided into segments. No one person except Ava had the complete picture. It would make coordination harder, but compromise less catastrophic. Nate returned from the bank just after noon, his expression caught between relief and rage. Linda eviscerated them, tore apart their justification for the emergency review, threatened legal action for retaliation against a crime victim, threw around phrases like bad faith dealing and punitive damages. They backed down. Loan review is suspended pending further documentation, which Linda says she'll drag out for months if needed. That's good news, Ruth said. But it doesn't solve the underlying problem. They tried financial pressure. It didn't work. They'll try something else. Let them try. Nate's voice was harder than Ava had heard it. I've been in this town for 30 years, built this business from nothing, survived recessions, droughts, the interstate bypass that was supposed to kill us. I'll be damned if some biker gang with delusions of grandeur is going to take it from me now. Kim was setting up equipment at Ruth's place, 3 laptops showing different camera feeds, a large monitor for aggregating views, secure cloud storage for automatic backup. The retired paramedic's house was indeed defensible, Ava noted. Clear approaches, solid construction, and Ruth's gun safe held an impressive array of firearms, all legally owned and meticulously maintained. I don't want to use them, Ruth said, catching Ava's glance at the weapons. But my daddy taught me that being prepared and being paranoid are 2 different things. Prepared means you have options. Paranoid means you see threats that aren't there. And the Reapers? Ava asked. Oh, they're there all right. Real as rattlesnakes. Ruth chambered around in a shotgun, then carefully set it aside. But just like rattlesnakes, you don't go hunting them for sport. You watch where you step, you make noise so they know you're coming, and you only shoot if they strike first. By 4 p.m., the network was active. Marcus reported from his rig parked at the lot's northeast corner with clear sight lines to the entrance and the highway. Sarah was southwest, her 6-camera setup covering blind spots. Pete's thermal imaging was calibrated and recording. Other trucks rotated through, maintaining the appearance of normal traffic while building a web of observation. Ava was in the diner, ostensibly having dinner, actually monitoring the CB radio and her phone. Kim was with Ruth, eyes locked on the camera feeds. Nate was in the kitchen preparing for the evening dinner rush that might or might not come. The anonymous tipster had said the shipment would arrive tonight. But when, and where exactly? The diner lot was the logical staging area, but the Reapers might use one of the county roads, might avoid the obvious location entirely. At 6:23 p.m., Marcus's voice crackled over the CB. Sunset, I repeat sunset. 3 bikes incoming from the east, moving slow like they're scouting. Ava's pulse quickened. Copy that. All units, cameras on maintained positions. No engagement. Through the diner window, she watched 3 Reapers roll into the lot. Not brick, These were different faces, younger, with the nervous energy of soldiers on a mission they didn't fully understand. They parked near the boarded window, sat on their bikes, and just waited. Kim's voice came through Ava's earpiece, barely a whisper. "I've got them on 4 different angles. Faces, clear patches visible, plates captured." Minutes ticked by. The Reapers didn't move, didn't enter the diner, just sat astride their bikes like sentries, waiting for something. Or someone. At 6:47, Sarah's voice. "Movement on County Road 17. Large vehicle looks like a box truck, no visible markings, approaching from the north." Ava's tactical mind started piecing it together. The bikes were advanced scouts' security. The truck was the payload. They'd used the diner lot for the transfer because it should have been compliant territory by now, broken, and too scared to notice or care about extra traffic. "Ruth, you getting this?" Ava murmured into her phone. "Every second. I've got the truck on Pete's thermal, definitely carrying cargo heavy load based on the suspension." The box truck slowed as it approached, the lot turn signal flashing. This was it, the moment they'd been preparing for. But then everything changed. The truck didn't turn into the lot. Instead, it continued past, accelerating slightly. The 3 Reapers' radios squawked. Ava could hear the feedback from where she sat. One of them looked directly at the diner at the window where Ava sat, and his eyes narrowed. They knew. "Abort," Ava said urgently into the CB. "Sunset, abort. They're spooked. All units stand down but keep recording." The Reapers' engines roared to life, but instead of following the truck, they turned toward the diner, toward Ava. Through her earpiece, Ruth's voice was tight with tension. "Ava, get out of there. Now!" But Ava was already moving, heading for the kitchen, for the back door. She could hear the bikes accelerating, hear boots hitting gravel. They were coming in. Nate grabbed her arm as she passed. "The walk-in cooler, false panel in the back. Get in." There was no time to question. Ava dove into the walk-in, found the panel, Nate indicated, pulled it aside to reveal a cramped space just big enough for a person. She squeezed in as voices echoed in the diner. "Where is she?" The voice was young, aggressive. "The trucker, bitch. We saw her in the window." "I don't know what you're talking about." Nate's voice was admirably steady. "I've got customers, I've got—" The sound of something hitting the counter hard. "Don't play stupid. We know she's coordinating something. We know you've got cameras everywhere. Where's the operations center?" Ava's blood froze. They knew about Ruth's place. Someone had talked. The mullet was real, and they'd given up the coordination point. "Ruth," Ava whispered into her phone, barely audible. "They know about your place. Get out. Take the equipment and run." Ruth's response was just as quiet. "Already moving. Kim's grabbing the drives. We're static. Then nothing. In the diner, the confrontation was escalating. Crashes, the sound of furniture being overturned. Nate was yelling now, telling them to get out, that he'd called the cops. "Call whoever you want," the Reaper snarled. "We'll be gone before they get here. But this place burns tonight. Message to your trucker friend and everyone who thinks they can mess with us." Ava heard liquid splashing. Gasoline. They were going to torch the diner with her inside. Her tactical assessment ran cold calculations. She could stay hidden, maybe survive if the fire didn't spread to the cooler before help arrived. Or she could act, try to stop them, risk everything on the chance she could somehow prevail against 3 armed men in their prime. But then she heard something else. A whimper. Kim's voice, terrified. "Please, I'm just a waitress. I don't—" They'd grabbed Kim. Somewhere between Ruth's place and here, they'd intercepted her. The calculation changed. Ava couldn't hide while Kim was in danger. She pushed the panel aside, stepped out of the cooler, and walked into the diner's main room. 3 Reapers. The youngest prospect patch, visible, held a jerry can of gasoline. The second had Nate pressed against the counter, a knife to his throat. The third had Kim by the hair, forcing her to her knees. They all turned to look at Ava. "Well, well," said the one holding Kim. "The guest of honor." Perfect timing. Ava's hands were empty, visible open. Her mind was calculating distances, trajectories, probabilities. 3 against 1. All armed. Kim and Nate at immediate risk. The odds were impossible. But she'd faced impossible odds before. "Let them go," Ava said quietly. "Your problem's with me. Let them go, and we can settle this." The Reaper laughed. "Settle this? You threw brick through a window. Got 3 of our brothers arrested. Cost us a shipment tonight because you couldn't mind your own business. You think we're here to settle? We're here to erase." "Then erase me. But them first. Let them walk out, then do whatever you came to do." She could see the consideration in his eyes, the weighing of options. But she could also see something else, orders. They'd been told to make an example, to create a scene that would terrify anyone thinking about standing up to the Reapers. Letting Nate and Kim go didn't serve that purpose. The Reaper shook his head. "Nice try. But no. See the way this works." He never finished the sentence. The diner's front door exploded inward and Marcus came through it like a freight train, 250 pounds of trucker fury catching the Reaper with the gasoline can in a tackle that sent both men crashing into a booth. Sarah was right behind him, pepper spray deployed, catching the knife-wielding Reaper square in the eyes. The third Reaper released Kim and reached for his belt for the gun holstered there. Ava was already moving, closing the distance in 3 strides, her hand clamping down on his wrist before the weapon cleared leather. She twisted, used his momentum against him, and sent him sprawling across a table that collapsed under his weight. Nate scrambled free, grabbed Kim, pulled her toward the door. The fight was chaos, Marcus grappling with Prospect, both men throwing wild punches. Sarah trying to secure the blinded Reaper while he swung blindly dangerous in his panic. The third Reaper surging up from the broken table, murder in his eyes as he focused on Ava. He charged. Ava sidestepped, grabbed a serving tray from the counter and brought it edge on against his temple. The metal rang like a bell, and he dropped. The Reaper. Marcus was fighting, managed to break free, gasoline-soaked and furious, fumbling in his vest. He pulled out a lighter. "Everybody back!" Marcus yelled. But the Reaper was already flicking the lighter, already bringing the flame toward his own gasoline-soaked clothes in a desperate suicidal gambit to take them all down. Ruth's voice cracked from the doorway. "I don't think so, son." The retired paramedic stood with her shotgun leveled, and the authority in her voice was absolute. The Reaper froze, lighter still in hand, calculating whether she'd actually shoot. "Drop it," Ruth said. "Drop it and walk out or I will end you where you stand. I've pulled too many kids from burning buildings to let you torch my friends." The lighter fell from his hand. Sirens were approaching now, the cavalry finally arriving. The Reapers knew it could hear their window of escape closing. The one Ava had hit was groggily trying to stand. The pepper-sprayed one was curled up, hands over his eyes. Prospect was held down by Marcus's knee in his back. "Outside," Ruth commanded. "Get on your bikes and run. And tell Brick that next time he wants to torch a building, he better come himself, instead of sending children to do a man's work." They didn't need to be told twice. The mobile Reapers half-carried their blinded companion, staggered to their bikes, and roared out of the lot, just as Sheriff Ruiz's cruiser screamed in. Ruiz took in the scene. Overturned furniture. The smell of gasoline. Kim shaking in Nate's arms. Ava breathing hard with a dented serving tray still in her hand. "I'm afraid to ask," Ruiz said. "Self-defense," Marcus rumbled. "All of it." "Of course it was." Ruiz's tone was bone dry. "And I suppose all these cameras that mysteriously appeared on these trucks just happened to record everything." "Every second," Sarah confirmed. "Multiple angles, time-stamped, GPS tagged." Ruiz holstered her weapon and pulled out her radio. Dispatch, this is Sheriff Ruiz. We need State Police FBI contact and Prosecutor Denton on the line. We've got attempted arson assault conspiracy and about 6 other charges. Also put out an APB on 3 subjects fleeing on motorcycles, all Road Reapers patches heading west on County 17. As deputies secured the scene, Ava pulled Ruth aside. How did you know to come back? I thought you were evacuating. Ruth's smile was grim. We were. Got 2 miles out when Kim's phone buzzed, emergency alert from the bank. Seems someone tried to drain Nate's account 10 minutes ago. Failed, but it was enough to tell us the attack wasn't just physical. They were hitting from multiple angles. The bank. Ava's mind raced. How would they access? Understanding dawned. The mole. Someone with account access. Someone who could coordinate the physical and financial attack. We need to find them, Ruth said, before they do more damage. But Ava was staring at something else now. At Nate, comforting Kim, his phone out as he talked to someone. And in his other hand, visible for just a moment before he pocketed it, a second phone. A burner, by the look of it. The missing 7th call. The too convenient timing. The way the Reapers seemed to know their plans. Ruth, Ava said slowly. I need to check something. Keep an eye on Nate. Don't let him leave. Don't let him make any calls. You think... Ruth's eyes went wide. No, not Nate. I hope I'm wrong. God, I hope I'm wrong. But as Ava watched Nate's movements, the pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. The man who'd stood with them, who'd seemed like a victim, who'd built this diner over 30 years, he'd also been the one with the most to lose, the most pressure points for the Reapers to exploit. And sometimes, when the pressure got high enough, even good people broke. Ava waited until Sheriff Ruiz had finished securing the immediate scene, before she approached, her voice low enough that only the sheriff could hear. I need to show you something. Privately. Ruiz's eyes narrowed, reading the tension in Ava's posture. My vehicle. 2 minutes. Inside the cruiser, with the doors closed and the windows up, Ava laid out what she'd observed: the burner phone, the mysterious 7th call, the way the Reapers had known about Ruth's command center, the timing of the bank account attack. She watched Ruiz's expression shift from skepticism to grim acceptance. You're saying Nate's been feeding them information, Ruiz said flatly. I'm saying the evidence points that way. I'm also saying a man under that much pressure, financial threats, physical danger, 30 years of work on the line, might make choices he'd never make otherwise. Ava's voice was careful, measured. The question is whether he did it willingly, or whether they forced his hand. Ruiz was quiet for a long moment, staring through the windshield at the diner where Nate still comforted Kim. If he's compromised, we need to isolate him. But if we tip him off that we know he warns them, and we lose any chance of tracking the bigger operation. So we feed him false information, Ava said. Tell him we're moving the command center to a new location, give him specific details. Then we watch who shows up. That's entrapment. No, that's giving him a choice. If he's innocent, nothing happens. If he's guilty but coerced, maybe he'll reach out for help before passing along the information. If he's actively working with them. Ava let the implication hang. Ruiz pulled out her phone, opened an encrypted messaging app. I've got a state investigator who owes me a favor. Someone Nate doesn't know. We can set up surveillance, monitor his communications. But Ava, if this goes sideways, if Nate is innocent and finds out we suspected him, it'll destroy what's left of trust in this group. I know, but if he's guilty and we don't act, people could die. They crafted the trap carefully. Back inside the diner, with deputies still photographing evidence and taking statements, Ava gathered the core group: Nate, Kim, Ruth, Marcus, and Sarah. She made sure Nate was listening as she outlined the plan. Ruth's place is compromised, Ava said. They knew about it, which means we need a new coordination point. Marcus has offered his property. It's 15 miles north, completely isolated, perfect security. We'll move all the equipment there tomorrow morning 6 a.m. sharp. Nobody else knows the location. This stays between us." She watched Nate's face as she spoke, saw the microscopic tightening around his eyes, the way his jaw clenched. He was processing, calculating. "Makes sense," Nate said, his voice steady. "The further from the diner, the better. Keep the heat off this place." Kim nodded agreement. Ruth played her part perfectly, expressing relief at having the command center moved somewhere more secure. Only Marcus caught Ava's eye with a questioning look. He hadn't offered his property, and he knew it. But he was smart enough to stay quiet. They dispersed slowly, exhaustion settling over the group like fog. Deputies finished their work and cleared out. Sheriff Ruiz pulled away with promises to follow up. By 10 p.m., the diner was closed, the lights dimmed, and Nate was alone in his office, supposedly doing paperwork. But Ava was in her truck across the parking lot, watching through night vision binoculars as Nate pulled out the burner phone and started typing. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ruiz. "Investigator Martinez has a signal intercept on the burner. If he sends anything, we'll have it." Minutes crawled by. Nate's silhouette was visible through the office window, hunched over the phone, typing, deleting, typing again. Whatever message he was crafting, it was taking time. The weight of betrayal, maybe, or the fear of what would happen if he didn't comply. Finally, Nate hit send. Ava's phone buzzed again. "Got it. Message reads, new location Marcus property 15 MI north 6 a.m. equipment move all units. Sent to a number registered to a shell corp tied to Jesus tied to the county procurement office." The county procurement office. The suited man from the warehouse. The pieces were connecting, forming a picture bigger than just a biker gang shaking down truck stops. Another text from Ruiz. "That procurement connection, it's Deputy Director Carl Voss. We've had our eye on him for contract irregularities, but never enough for charges. If he's coordinating with the Reapers..." Ava's mind raced through implications. A county official could provide cover, could manipulate records, could use government resources to enable a criminal network. The Reapers weren't just thugs, they were the enforcement arm of something more sophisticated. Nate emerged from the diner, locked up, and got into his truck. He didn't drive home. Instead, he headed east on County Road 17 toward the highway. Ava followed at a distance, lights off, using the moon to navigate the familiar road. He drove for 20 minutes before pulling into an abandoned gas station, the kind of place that had been gutted by the interstate bypass years ago. A single vehicle was already there, a black Suburban with government plates. Carl Voss stepped out, and even from 200 yards away through binoculars, Ava could see the anger in his posture. Nate got out of his truck slowly, reluctantly, like a man walking to his own execution. She couldn't hear the conversation, but she could read the body language. Voss was aggressive, pointing clearly, making demands. Nate was defensive, hands up, shaking his head. Then Voss pulled out a phone, showed Nate something on the screen, and Nate's whole body seemed to collapse inward. Whatever was on that screen, it had broken him. Ava was already texting Ruiz, sending her location, requesting backup. But backup was 20 minutes out, and this meeting could be over in 5. She made a decision that would either crack the case open or get her killed. Ava drove forward, headlights blazing to life, engine roaring as she accelerated toward the gas station. Both men turned toward the sound, caught in the high beams like deer. She saw Voss's hand move toward his jacket, toward a weapon, but she was already braking hard, throwing the truck into park, keeping the lights trained on them. "Sheriff's Department is 3 minutes out," she shouted through her open window, bluffing on the timeline. "Both of you hands where I can see them." Voss's hand stopped its movement toward his jacket. Nate just stood there, frozen. "This is private property," Voss called back, his voice carrying bureaucratic authority. "You're trespassing." "And you're conspiring with a criminal organization," Ava shot back. "I've got you on camera meeting with an individual who just tipped off the road reapers to law enforcement operations. That's obstruction conspiracy, and about 5 other charges." She was recording everything on her phone, which was mounted on the dash, and streaming to cloud storage. Insurance evidence, and a dead man's switch if this went bad. Voss's expression shifted calculation, replacing anger. "You're the trucker, the one who assaulted Brick Danner." His smile was cold. "You know there's been a warrant issued for your arrest. Failure to appear on that assault charge. Seems you never showed up for your court date." Ava's blood went cold. "I was never notified of a court date." "Funny how paperwork gets lost sometimes." Voss pulled out his phone. "I could call the sheriff right now, have you arrested. Of course, while you're in custody, a lot can happen. Accidents, complications. You might never make it to trial." It was a threat wrapped in legal procedure, and they both knew it. Voss had the power to manipulate the system to turn the machinery of justice into a weapon. But Ava had something he didn't. She had the truth documented and distributed. "You could do that," Ava agreed. "But you won't, because the second I'm arrested, every piece of evidence I've collected, recordings, videos, documents, gets released to the FBI, the state police, and the media. Automatic trigger. You touch me, and your whole operation becomes front-page news." Voss's jaw tightened. "You're bluffing." "Try me." The standoff stretched tension, building like pressure in a sealed container. Nate was looking between them, his face a mask of misery. "They have my daughter," Nate said suddenly, his voice breaking. "Voss showed me photos. Rebecca in her apartment in Denver. They know where she works, where she parks her routine. They said if I didn't cooperate, if I didn't feed them information, she'd have an accident." The words landed like stones in water ripples of understanding spreading through Ava's mind. Not a willing traitor, a father protecting his child. "That's not cooperation, Nate," Ava said gently. "That's coercion. That's witness intimidation and extortion." "Prove it," Voss said. "Prove we made any threats. It's his word against mine, and I'm a decorated public servant while he's a desperate business owner with questionable associates." Sirens finally reached Ava's ears, distant but approaching. Voss heard them too. His expression darkened. "This isn't over," Voss said. He turned to Nate. "Remember what's at stake. Remember who has the reach to touch the people you love." Then he was in his Suburban, reversing hard tires, spitting gravel as he fled. Ava let him go. Chasing him would accomplish nothing, and she had what she needed: the meeting on camera, Nate's confession, and enough to connect Voss to the larger conspiracy. Sheriff Ruiz's cruiser arrived with 2 state police vehicles right behind. Ava briefed them quickly while Nate sat in his truck, head in his hands. Ruiz listened, her expression growing grimmer with each detail. "Carl Voss has been untouchable for 5 years. We've suspected corruption, but could never prove it. If he's the bridge between county government and the reapers..." "He's been enabling them," Ava finished. "Using his position to provide cover, to manipulate investigations, to pressure their targets through official channels. The bank loan review, the warrant for my arrest that doesn't exist, all his work." One of the state troopers was on his phone, speaking in urgent tones. He turned to Ruiz. "Ma'am, we've got a situation. The Reaper's warehouse, the one tied to the parts operation, it's on fire. Fully involved fire department says it's a total loss. They're saying it looks like accelerant was used." "They're destroying evidence," Ava said. "Voss tipped them off that we're closing in, so they're burning everything that could connect them." "We need to move now," Ruiz said. She pointed to one of the troopers. Get me a warrant for Carl Voss's arrest, conspiracy, obstruction, witness intimidation, the works. And I want every piece of electronic communication he's had in the past 6 months subpoenaed. To the other trooper. Contact the FBI field office in Denver. Tell them we need protective custody for Rebecca Olvera immediately. Give them her address and workplace. Nate will provide details. Nate looked up at the mention of his daughter's name, hope and fear warring on his face. You can protect her. We can try, Ruiz said. But Nate, you need to tell us everything. Every conversation with Voss, every piece of information you passed along, every threat they made. Complete cooperation, or I can't help you. I'll tell you everything, Nate said, his voice hollow. I never wanted, I was just trying to keep her safe. I know, Ruiz said, not unkindly. But the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and right now you're standing at the gates. They relocated to the sheriff's station, where Nate gave a statement that lasted 3 hours. Ava sat in on part of it, filling in gaps with her own observations. The picture that emerged was damning, a conspiracy that stretched from Brick's Road Reapers through Carl Voss's county office to a network of chop shops and corrupt businesses across 5 states. The Reapers provided muscle and transportation. Voss provided legal cover and government resources. Together, they'd created a pipeline that stole vehicles, stripped them for parts, and distributed those parts through seemingly legitimate channels. Towns like Red Butte were targeted as waypoints, places where trucks could stop, where cargo could be transferred, where questions wouldn't be asked because the locals were too intimidated or too compromised to speak up. Rollins wasn't the first, Nate admitted. Voss told me there were 6 other towns before that, places that tried to resist and got crushed, business owners who ended up bankrupt or worse. He showed me newspaper clippings, a diner owner in Montana who had a heart attack at 43, a truck stop operator in Colorado whose place burned down with him inside. He made it clear, cooperate or join them. Why didn't you come to us? Ruiz asked. Because he showed me you couldn't protect anyone, Nate said bitterly. He had copies of police reports, investigation files, evidence that disappeared or got mishandled. He said he had people inside law enforcement people who'd make sure any complaint I filed would vanish. What was I supposed to do? Risk my daughter's life on the hope that this time would be different. Ava understood his logic, even as she hated its conclusion. Fear was a powerful motivator, and Voss had weaponized it perfectly. By 2 a.m., they had enough for a federal case. The FBI was officially involved, agents dispatched from Denver and Cheyenne. Rebecca Olvera was in protective custody, safe in a hotel with 2 agents guarding her door. Warrants were being executed on Voss's home and office, on the Reapers' known properties, on businesses suspected of being part of the pipeline. But Brick Danner was still in the wind. The warehouse fire had destroyed most of the physical evidence, and Voss, despite the warrant, had disappeared. His Suburban found abandoned near the Wyoming-Colorado border. His phone disconnected, his credit cards unused. He had an exit strategy, Ruiz said, staring at the map on her office wall where pins marked the expanding investigation. Probably multiple identities, offshore accounts, safe houses. We're not catching him tonight. What about the shipment? Ava asked. The one that was supposed to come through. It got spooked, but those parts still exist. That truck is still out there. Ruiz nodded slowly. The FBI has resources we don't. Highway patrol surveillance informants. If there's a truck full of stolen motorcycle parts moving through the region, they'll find it. She turned to Ava. But that's their job now. Yours is to go home, get some sleep, and let us handle it. I can't, Ava said. Not while Brick is still out there. Not while he thinks he can intimidate people into silence. Ava, you've done enough. More than enough. You gave us the break we needed, the evidence to build a case. But you're not law enforcement. You're a civilian who's already been assaulted, threatened, and nearly burned alive. Go home." But even as Ruiz said it, Ava's phone was buzzing with an incoming message. Unknown number, but the content made her pulse spike. "You cost us everything. The warehouse, the Operation Voss on the run. Brick wants to settle this personal. Tomorrow night, the old mining road overlook. Just you and him. You win, we leave Red Butte forever. He wins. Well, they'll find pieces of you across 3 counties. Come alone, or we start with Kim, then Ruth, then everyone else you've dragged into this." Ava showed the message to Ruiz, watched the sheriff's face go from exhausted to furious. "It's a trap," Ruiz said flatly. "They're trying to isolate you, get you alone where they can finish this without witnesses." "I know. So you're obviously not going." Ava was quiet for a moment, thinking through the angles. "If I don't go, they escalate. They've already shown they'll go after people I care about. Kim, Ruth, Nate. They become targets. We can protect them. Can you 24/7 indefinitely? You've got 3 deputies for the whole county, Ruiz. You can't guard everyone forever, and even with the FBI involved, it'll take weeks to round up all the Reapers. In the meantime, Brick is out there, angry, humiliated, with nothing to lose." Ruiz leaned back in her chair, hands over her face. "You're not seriously considering this." "I'm considering that Brick wants to settle this like it's some Old West showdown because he's too stupid to realize this isn't a movie. But his stupidity gives us an opportunity. We set the terms, we control the environment, we turn his trap into ours." How? Ava pulled up a map on her phone, zooming in on the old mining road overlook Brick had specified. "It's a choke point. Only one road in steep drop-offs on 3 sides. He picked it thinking it would isolate me, but it also isolates him. We put surveillance in place position assets around the perimeter, and when he makes his move, we have him surrounded." "That's a massive operation for one arrest," Ruiz pointed out. "It's not just one arrest. Brick doesn't travel alone. He'll bring backup, probably the core of his crew. We take them all at once on camera attempting to assault or murder a civilian. That's conspiracy attempted murder, and it ties them directly to all the threats they've been making." Ava's expression was hard. "We end this tomorrow night. Completely." Ruiz studied her for a long moment. "You know this could still go sideways. Even with backup. Even with surveillance. If Brick decides to shoot first and talk later, you could be dead before we can intervene." "I know. And you're willing to take that risk." Ava thought about Kim's shaking hands, becoming steady. About Nate's quiet courage in the face of impossible pressure. About Ruth's fierce protection of her community. About all the other Red Buttes out there, all the other small towns being crushed by networks like the Reapers because nobody was willing to stand. "I'm willing," Ava said. They spent the rest of the night planning. FBI involvement meant resources, surveillance drones, long-range audio tactical units positioned in concealment. The mining road overlook would become a kill box, but instead of Ava being the target, it would be Brick and his crew walking into the trap. Marcus and Sarah volunteered to provide additional surveillance from their rigs positioned on adjacent roads with camera views of the approaches. Ruth insisted on being part of the tactical team, and her military medic background made her too valuable to refuse. Even Kim wanted to help, but Ruiz put her foot down. Kim had been through enough, and she'd be safer at the sheriff's station. By dawn, the plan was set. Ava would arrive at the overlook at the specified time, 9 p.m., just after dark. She'd be wired for sound and wearing a concealed body camera. Brick would make his move likely with backup, and the moment he acted on his threats, tactical units would move in. "Remember," Ruiz emphasized, "we need him to clearly demonstrate intent. Threats alone won't get us attempted murder, we need action. But the second you feel unsafe, you give the signal and we move. Don't be a hero." Heroes get people killed, Ava replied. I'm just trying to end this. She spent the day preparing checking equipment, reviewing the plan, trying to quiet the voice in her head that whispered about all the ways this could fail. She called her sister in Oregon just to hear her voice making up some excuse about wanting to catch up. She wrote down her truck's title information and passwords to her accounts just in case. Practical preparations for an impractical situation. At 7 p.m., as the sun started its descent toward the horizon, Ava met with the tactical team for final briefing. FBI Special Agent Morrison, a lean woman in her 40s, with the calm competence of someone who'd done this 100 times, walked through the plan one more time. Ava, you're the principal. Your job is to stay alive and get Brick talking. We need clear audio of him making threats or confessing to crimes. Once we have that plus visual confirmation of hostile action, we move. Questions. What if he just shoots me on sight? Ava asked. Then we have attempted murder on multiple cameras and we respond immediately, but based on his profile, ego-driven needs to dominate, wants to prove something, he'll want to talk first. He'll want you to know you lost before he acts. Comforting, Ava muttered. Ruth caught her before she left for the overlook. The older woman pulled her into a fierce hug. You come back from this. You hear me? You've given us all something to believe in again. Don't you dare die before we get to celebrate properly. I'll do my best, Ava promised. Kim was waiting by Ava's truck, holding something wrapped in a dish towel. I made you a sandwich, coconut cream pie filling on sourdough. I know it sounds weird, but my grandmother always said sweet things give you courage for bitter fights. Ava took the bizarre sandwich, touched by the gesture. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Kim replied, for everything, for not running when you could have. As Ava drove toward the mining road, the sun painting the sky in shades of fire and blood, she unwrapped the sandwich and took a bite. It was weird, sweet, and bread didn't quite mesh, but it was also perfect in its own way. A reminder that courage came in unexpected forms. The mining road was exactly as the maps had shown, narrow, winding climbing toward an overlook that jutted out over a canyon. Ava's truck labored up the grade, and she could feel the isolation settling around her like a shroud. No other vehicles, no buildings, just sage and rock, and the vast indifference of the high plains. She reached the overlook at 8:47 p.m. 13 minutes early. She parked, killed the engine, and got out to survey the position. The overlook was a natural platform of stone maybe 50 feet across, with a sheer drop on 3 sides, and the road as the only exit. Brick had chosen well if his goal was to trap someone. But as Ava looked around, she spotted the concealed positions where tactical units would be hiding behind rock formations, in shallow depressions positions that provided cover and clear fields of fire. Alpha team in position, came the whisper in her earpiece. You're covered. Bravo team set, another voice confirmed. We have eyes on approach road. Charlie team ready. Drone is airborne. Ava walked to the edge of the overlook and looked down into the canyon where shadows were already pooling. Somewhere down there, a river reflected the dying light. It was beautiful in a stark, unforgiving way, the kind of beauty that didn't care whether you lived or died in it. She heard the motorcycles before she saw them. The rumble echoed off canyon walls, growing louder, multiple engines in rough harmony. Her heart rate picked up, but she controlled her breathing, stayed calm. This was just another convoy, different vehicles, different stakes, but the same principle. Stay alert, stay professional, stay alive. 3 bikes crested the rise and rolled onto the overlook. Brick on the lead bike. Torch and Grit flanking him. They parked in a line, engines idling, then killed them in sequence. The sudden silence was profound. Brick dismounted slowly, theatrically, making sure Ava could see every movement. His face was a mess of bruises from his flight through the window, yellowing now, with a nasty cut across his eyebrow held together by butterfly bandages. But his eyes were clear and full of malice. "You showed up," he said, sounding genuinely surprised. "I figured you'd run. That's what smart people do when they're outmatched." "I'm here to end this," Ava said. "You wanted to settle things, so let's settle them." Brick laughed, the sound harsh and humorless. "Settle like this is some negotiation." He stepped closer, and Ava could smell the whiskey on his breath, see the slight unsteadiness in his gait. Drunk or high or both, a dangerous combination. "You destroyed my operation, got my brothers arrested, cost me everything. You think we're going to shake hands and walk away?" "I think you're going to prison," Ava said evenly. "You, Voss, everyone involved in the pipeline. It's over, Brick. The FBI has the evidence. Witnesses are cooperating. Your warehouse burned, but not before they documented everything. You lost." "I haven't lost," Brick snarled. "Not until you're dead. Not until everyone knows what happens to people who cross the road reapers." He nodded to Torch and Grit. They dismounted, flanking Ava, cutting off angles of escape. Standard intimidation tactic, but it also put them in perfect view of the concealed cameras. "Last chance," Brick said. "Get on your knees, beg, maybe I make it quick." "No," Ava said simply. Brick's face twisted with rage. "You stupid!" His hand went to his belt, to the pistol holstered there. "I'm going to enjoy this. Now!" Ava shouted, diving to the side as the tactical units erupted from concealment. Searchlights blazed to life, turning night into day. FBI agents emerged from positions Ava hadn't even spotted, weapons trained on the three Reapers. The drone overhead captured everything in high-definition clarity. "Federal agents, hands up, do not move." Brick froze his hand on his weapon, but not drawn. Torch and Grit were caught mid-step, completely exposed. The trap had snapped shut perfectly. "Drop the weapon hands where we can see them." For a long moment, Brick seemed to consider his options, the gun. Half drawn, the agents surrounding him, the impossibility of his situation. Then something in him broke. Not submission, but something darker. The look of a man who'd decided that if he was going down, he was taking someone with him. His hand moved, pulling the gun free. Ava was already rolling, putting rock between herself and the line of fire, but she saw it happen in horrific slow motion. Brick bringing the weapon up. FBI agents shouting, fingers tightening on triggers. The gunshots were deafening in the confined space of the overlook, echoing off stone walls, a percussion symphony of violence. Ava counted them without thinking. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then silence broken only by ringing ears and labored breathing. She raised her head cautiously. Brick was down, his weapon several feet away, agents swarming to secure him. He was alive. She could see his chest moving, but blood was spreading across his shoulder and leg. Non-lethal shots perfectly placed to disable, without killing. Torch and Grit were face-down, hands zip-tied behind their backs. Agents reading them their rights in monotone voices that had delivered the same words countless times. "Clear," Agent Morrison called out. "We're clear." Ava stood on shaking legs. Ruth was suddenly there, having emerged from one of the concealed positions, medical bag in hand, moving to assess Brick's injuries with professional detachment. "Through and through on the shoulder, femoral artery intact on the leg wound," Ruth called out. "He'll live to stand trial, barely." Sheriff Ruiz appeared at Ava's side. "You okay?" Ava nodded, not trusting her voice yet. The adrenaline was crashing now, leaving her hollow and trembling. "That was the stupidest brave thing I've ever witnessed," Ruiz said. "And it worked perfectly. We've got attempted murder on multiple cameras, weapons charges, everything we need." "Is it over?" Ava asked. Ruiz looked at the scene, the arrested Reapers, the FBI agents processing evidence, the drone still circling overhead. "This part is. But Voss is still out there. The pipeline's disrupted, but not destroyed. This is a victory, Ava, but not the end of the war." "Then we keep fighting," Ava said, finding her voice again. "Until it is the end." As the FBI transported the Reapers to federal custody, and agents began processing the scene, Ava walked back to her truck. She was exhausted, battered, her back still aching from Torch's kick that felt like it had happened a lifetime ago instead of just 2 days. Her phone buzzed. A message from Kim. "Ruth says you're okay. Come back to the diner when you're done. We're keeping it open all night and the first slice of pie is on me." Ava smiled despite everything. She typed back, "Save me 2 slices. I've earned it." The drive back to Red Butte took 30 minutes, and with each mile, Ava felt the weight of the past 48 hours settling into her bones. Tomorrow would bring more questions, more statements, more legal proceedings. The FBI would want comprehensive debriefings. The media would probably get wind of the story and descend like locusts. But tonight, there was pie. There was community. There was the knowledge that they'd stood against something corrupt, and won, even if the victory was incomplete. As she pulled into the diner's lot, she saw lights blazing in every window, saw trucks parked in rows, saw people gathered inside. Marcus waved from a booth. Sarah was at the counter with coffee. Nate was in the kitchen, visible through the serving window, and for the first time since this started, he was smiling. Ava parked her rig, killed the engine, and sat for a moment in the silence. Then she climbed down and walked toward the light, toward the people who'd become something more than allies in a fight. They'd become the reason to fight in the first place. The diner was more crowded than Ava had ever seen it, every booth packed with truckers, locals, and even a few faces she didn't recognize, people who'd heard what happened and wanted to be part of something that felt like victory. The air hummed with conversation, laughter, cutting through the exhaustion that clung to everyone like dust from the road. Kim met Ava at the door with a hug that nearly knocked her over the young waitress's arms, surprisingly strong. "You did it. You actually did it." "We did it," Ava corrected, her voice rough with emotion she hadn't let herself feel until now. "All of us." Ruth was already waving her over to a booth where Marcus and Sarah sat with steaming mugs of coffee. The coconut cream pie sat waiting, 2 perfect slices that caught the light like they'd been staged for a magazine shoot. Ava slid into the booth and let the warmth of the diner, the presence of people who'd become family in the span of 72 hours, wash over her. "FBI's still processing the scene," Ruth said, setting down her phone. "Morrison says Brick's in surgery for the gunshot wounds, but he'll make it to trial. Torch and Grit are already lawyering up, but with the video evidence, they don't have much room to maneuver." "What about Voss?" Sarah asked the question everyone was thinking. Ava shook her head. "Still ghost. But Morrison said they've got his financial records, his communications, everything. Even if he's running broke and exposed. It's only a matter of time." Marcus leaned back, his weathered face thoughtful. "You know what I keep thinking about? How close we came to this being just another story about a truck stop that closed another town that got crushed. If you'd just driven away that first night." "I almost did," Ava admitted, cutting into the pie. The first bite was exactly as she remembered, sweet, light, perfect. Sat in my cab for 10 minutes thinking about how much easier it would be to just roll out. "What stopped you?" Kim asked, sliding into the booth beside Ruth. Ava thought about the question, about all the moments that had led her here. "I spent 6 years in the army teaching people to survive. But survival isn't enough, you know. At some point you have to ask what you're surviving for. And that night, watching you shake behind that counter, watching Nate try to de-escalate, watching Ruth ready to document everything, I realized I was tired of surviving. I wanted to fight for something again. The diner door opened, and Nate emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron. The past 2 days had carved lines into his face that would probably never fully fade, but his eyes were clearer than Ava had seen them since this started. He carried a fresh pot of coffee, moving between tables, topping off cups, accepting thanks from customers with quiet nods. When he reached their booth, he stopped. I owe you all an apology. Especially you, Ava. Nate, Ava started, but he held up a hand. No, let me say this. I was compromised. I put all of you at risk because I was too scared to trust that we could win. I fed them information, helped them know our moves, and people could have died because of it. His voice cracked. My daughter's safe now because you all were brave enough to fight when I wasn't. That's a debt I can never repay. Ruth reached out and squeezed his hand. You were protecting your child. Any parent would have done the same. What matters is you came clean when it counted. And your testimony is going to put Voss away when they catch him, Marcus added. That takes guts, knowing he might have people who could still reach Rebecca. The FBI's got her in witness protection, Nate said. New identity, new city, the works. She called me an hour ago. She's scared but safe. And she told me... His voice broke again. She told me she was proud of me for finally standing up. Ava felt something loosen in her chest. Not forgiveness exactly, that would take time, but understanding. Nate had been broken by an impossible situation and had found a way to put himself back together. That took a different kind of courage. The door opened again, and Sheriff Ruiz walked in with Agent Morrison. The conversations in the diner dimmed as people turned to look, waiting for news. Ruiz held up her hands. Just here for coffee and updates. But since you're all staring, yes, Brick and his crew are in federal custody. Yes, we have enough evidence to charge them with about 30 different felonies. And yes, the investigation is expanding to the other towns the pipeline hit. We're looking at RICO charges, which means this goes way beyond Wyoming. A cheer went up from the truckers' coffee mugs, raised in salute. Morrison stepped forward, her FBI credentials visible on her belt. I want to say something to all of you, Morrison said, her voice cutting through the celebration. What you did here, the documentation, the coordination, the willingness to stand up, that's not normal. Most communities facing this kind of pressure fold. They scatter, they hide, they hope it passes. You didn't. And because you didn't, we have a case that's going to dismantle a criminal network operating across 5 states? What happens to Red Butte now? Someone called from the back. That's up to you, Morrison replied. The immediate threat is gone. Brick's organization is fractured, but there are always other predators looking for vulnerable communities. My advice: keep doing what you did here. Keep watching out for each other. Keep documenting. Keep being too stubborn to intimidate. Sarah stood up from the booth. We've been talking the truckers. We want to formalize what we did here. Create a network dashcam footage, CB coordination, rapid response when one of us spots trouble. Not just for Red Butte, but for all the small stops along our routes. Marcus nodded. Call it the Lane Line Network, after the woman who showed us how to fight smart. Ava felt heat rise to her face. You don't have to. We do, Marcus interrupted. Because this works. What we did here, the surveillance, the evidence collection, the community coordination, it's a model. Other places need to see it, can work. The idea took shape in the conversation that followed. Truckers would serve as mobile observers, their dash cams creating a rolling surveillance network. Small businesses in vulnerable locations would be trained in evidence collection and legal self-defense. Sheriff's departments across the region would be connected to share information faster than criminals could move. Kim was already on her laptop, sketching out a website. We need a hotline, a way for people to report suspicious activity anonymously, and a repository for evidence that can't be tampered with. I know some cybersecurity people from my army days, Ava said, her tactical mind engaging with the problem. We can set up encrypted channels, distributed storage, the works. Make it so even if one piece gets compromised, the network stays intact. Ruth was scribbling notes on a napkin. And we need training programs. How to de-escalate confrontations, how to document without escalating, how to coordinate with law enforcement effectively. I've got contacts in emergency services across 3 states who'd help develop curriculum. Nate set down his coffee pot. The diner can be a hub. We've already got the infrastructure, power, internet, central location. I can set aside the back room for coordination, equipment, storage, whatever you need. The energy in the room was transforming, shifting from celebration to purpose. What had started as a desperate defense was becoming something larger, a blueprint for resistance, a framework for communities to protect themselves. Morrison was watching with an expression Ava couldn't quite read. Finally, the FBI agent spoke. What you're describing, it's vigilantism if done wrong. It's community policing if done right. The difference is razor thin, and it depends on staying on the right side of the law every single time. We know, Ava said. That's why we document everything. Why we coordinate with official channels. Why we never ever engage unless it's clear self-defense. This isn't about replacing law enforcement, it's about being the eyes and ears you don't have resources to deploy everywhere. Morrison considered this, then nodded slowly. If you're serious about this, I can connect you with our community outreach division. They've been working on public-private partnerships for rural crime prevention. What you've built here, it could be a pilot program. The conversation stretched into the early morning hours, plans layering on plans, ideas building on ideas. Truckers volunteered routes, businesses offered resources, locals shared stories of other places that needed help. The Lane Line network was taking shape in real time, born from trauma, but built on hope. Around 3 a.m., Ava stepped outside for air. The Wyoming night was clear and cold, stars scattered across the sky like spilled diamonds. She could hear the distant sound of the interstate, the eternal river of commerce that had brought her here in the first place. Ruth joined her 2 fresh cups of coffee in hand. Can't sleep either. Too much caffeine, too much adrenaline, too much everything. Ava accepted the coffee gratefully. You know this could all fall apart, right? The network, the coordination, all of it. One bad actor, one lawsuit, one tragedy. We can't prevent it could crumble. Could, Ruth agreed. But it also might not. It might spread, might grow, might become something that actually changes how vulnerable communities protect themselves. She sipped her coffee. My husband was a firefighter. Died in a wildfire trying to save a family's ranch. You know what he always said? You can't prevent every fire, but you can teach people to spot the smoke. That's what we're doing, Ava said slowly. Teaching people to spot the smoke. And you're the one who showed us how. Ruth's voice was soft, but certain. You walked into hell, and walked back out with a roadmap. That's worth something, Ava. That's worth everything. The door opened, and Kim stuck her head out. You guys need to see this. FBI just made an arrest. They hurried back inside to find everyone clustered around Kim's laptop. The screen showed a newsfeed breaking news banner scrolling across the bottom. The headline made Ava's breath catch. County official arrested in multi-state criminal conspiracy. The footage showed Carl Voss being led out of a motel in handcuffs, FBI agents surrounding him. He looked diminished somehow, the bureaucratic authority that had made him dangerous stripped away. Just a middle-aged man in a rumpled suit, facing the consequences of choices that had seemed safe when he was winning. Morrison's phone was already ringing. She answered, listened, then turned to the group with grim satisfaction. They got him trying to cross into Mexico with fake IDs and $200,000 in cash. He's cooperating already, giving up names, locations, the whole structure of the pipeline. How many arrests? Ruiz asked. FBI says at least 40 by morning. Chop shops, corrupt officials, Reaper lieutenants, the whole network. Morrison's expression was fierce. What you started here, it's ending criminal operations that have been running for a decade. The diner erupted in cheers again, but this time Ava felt the weight of it differently. Not just victory, but vindication. Proof that standing up mattered, that ordinary people could face down organized corruption and win. Nate was crying openly now, relief and grief and exhaustion all pouring out at once. Kim held him, this unlikely pair who'd been through hell together and come out changed. Marcus was on his CB spreading the word across the trucker network. Sarah was already drafting a press release for the Lane Line network. And Ruth was looking at Ava with something like pride, like a teacher watching a student surpass the lesson. As dawn broke over the high plains, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, the diner finally started to empty. Truckers headed back to their roots, carrying stories of what had happened in Red Butte. Locals drifted home with promises to return for the planning meeting Kim was already organizing. The FBI packed up their equipment, taking with them evidence that would fuel prosecutions for years. Ava found herself alone at the counter. The diner finally quiet, except for the hum of the industrial refrigerator and the distant clatter of Nate cleaning up in the kitchen. Her truck was outside, fueled and ready, the open road calling like it always did. But something had changed. The road didn't feel like escape anymore. It felt like connection, a way to carry what they'd built here to other places, other communities that needed to know they could fight back. Sheriff Ruiz sat down beside her, looking as exhausted as Ava felt. So what's next for you, back to hauling freight? Eventually, Ava said. But first I'm going to visit some of those other towns the pipeline hit. Talk to the business owners, the locals. See if they want to be part of what we're building. The Lane Line Network. Yeah, stupid name, but it's growing on me. Ava smiled tiredly. Someone has to help them rebuild. Help them see they're not alone. Might as well be someone who's been through it. Ruiz nodded slowly. You know you're going to be a target, right? Not just the Reapers, they're done, but others like them. Word spreads about a trucker who organizes communities against criminals, and you become a problem people want to solve. I know, Ava said. But I also know I don't have to fight alone anymore. We proved that here. Nate emerged from the kitchen with a paper bag. For the road, coconut cream pie turkey sandwich and enough coffee to get you to the Colorado border. He set it on the counter, then met Ava's eyes. I know I don't deserve your trust. Don't deserve to be part of what you're building. But if you'll have me, I want to help. Want to make sure no other parent gets put in the position I was in. Ava stood and offered her hand. We could use someone who understands how they pressure people, how they find the cracks and exploit them. That knowledge that's valuable. Nate shook her hand, his grip firm. Then you've got it, all of it. Kim came out of the back room with a box. Supplies for your truck. First aid kit, spare phones, portable hotspot charging cables. Basically everything you might need to set up a mobile command center. She grinned. I may have gotten a little excited about the logistics. This is perfect, Ava said, genuinely moved. Kim, you've got a gift for organization. Have you ever thought about joining you on the road? Kim finished. Ruth already asked. And yeah, I'm thinking about it. Someone needs to keep your files organized and your coffee strong. Ruth appeared as if summoned. I didn't ask. I suggested. There's a difference. She handed Ava a folder. Contacts. Every sheriff, police chief, and community organizer I know across Wyoming, Colorado, Montana, and Nebraska. People who'll listen when you tell them what happened here. Ava flipped through the folder, dozens of names, numbers, brief notes about each person's situation and personality. It was a road map, a network already half built, waiting for someone to activate it. You all planned this, Ava said, looking at the three of them. The supplies, the contacts, the pitch for Kim to join me. You're trying to make sure I don't disappear back into anonymous trucking. Damn right we are, Ruth said. Because what you started here matters, and we're not letting it die because you get modest or scared. I'm not scared, Ava protested. Liar, Ruth said fondly. You're terrified. Terrified of mattering, of having people depend on you, of building something that might fail. I see it because I've been there. After my husband died, I almost quit emergency medicine because I was scared of caring that much again. She gripped Ava's shoulder. But scared and stopped aren't the same thing. You taught us that. Through the diner windows, the sun was fully up now, harsh and bright and honest. Ava could see her truck gleaming in the parking lot, a road warrior ready for the next battle. But she could also see the diner boarded window being replaced even now by a contractor Nate had called new cameras being installed by Marcus, the Service Workers Safe Space sign Kim had designed being mounted by the door. Evidence that standing up changed things, that communities could protect themselves, that dignity was worth defending. Ava gathered the supplies, the contacts, the pie. She hugged each of them, Ruth's fierce embrace. Kim's grateful squeeze, Nate's tentative but sincere clasp. Marcus and Sarah came over from where they'd been coordinating with other truckers, adding their own goodbyes and promises to stay connected. First stop? Sarah asked. Rollins, Ava said. The town that got crushed before we fought back. They deserve to know it's safe to rebuild now, that the network that destroyed them is gone. And after Rollins, Ava smiled. Every other town on Ruth's list. Every place that's been pressured, threatened, intimidated. We're going to show them what's possible when ordinary people refuse to be victims. She climbed into her truck, settled into the familiar seat, felt the engine rumble to life beneath her. The CB crackled with truckers checking in reporting positions, maintaining the watch they'd established. The laptop Kim had set up showed camera feeds from Red Butte, evidence that their defenses were holding. As Ava pulled out of the lot, she looked in her mirror one last time. The diner was framed there, battered, but standing occupied, but not broken, a fortress of community built from nothing more than courage and coconut cream pie. Ruth's voice came through the CB. Lane Line Actual, this is Red Butte Base. You're clear to roll. And Ava, thank you for everything. Red Butte Base, this is Lane Line Actual, Ava replied, using the call signs they'd established. Thank you for giving me something worth fighting for. Lane Line Actual rolling west. See you down the road. She clicked off the CB and pointed her truck toward Rollins, toward the next town that needed to know they weren't alone, toward the future they'd built from the ashes of intimidation. The highway stretched out before her, familiar, but transformed. Not an escape route anymore. A supply line. A connection between communities learning to protect themselves. A lane line marking the path forward. Somewhere ahead there would be other bullies, other networks of corruption, other Bricks and Vosses who thought power came from fear. But there would also be other Kims learning to document other Nates, finding courage to resist other Ruths ready to defend their communities. And connecting them all, a network of truckers, their cameras rolling their radios, crackling their eyes, watching for the smoke before the fire could spread. Ava Lane, former Army convoy instructor turned independent trucker turned accidental. Revolutionary smiled as Wyoming scrolled past her windows. She'd spent 2 years drifting, looking for purpose on the endless road. She'd found it in a diner where they kicked the wrong woman in the back. And now, mile by mile, town by town, she was going to make sure everyone knew dignity beats intimidation. Documentation beats brute force. And community stubborn, organized, relentless community beats corruption every single time. The sun climbed higher, burning off the morning haze, revealing the high plains in all their austere beauty. Ava's phone buzzed with messages, other truckers reporting in towns, asking for help, the lane line network spreading faster than she'd imagined possible. She'd answer them all. Visit every town. Train every person willing to learn. Build something that would outlast any single criminal network, any single corrupt official, any single act of intimidation. Because that's what happened when you kicked someone who knew how to turn physics into poetry, fear into resistance, and a simple truck stop into the first line of defense for an entire region. They kicked the trucker girl in the back, and she built an army. The road stretched on infinite and full of promise, and Ava Lane drove toward the horizon where the next fight was waiting, ready to show them all that some lines, the ones drawn in dust by ordinary people with extraordinary courage, could never be erased.